Hey everyone, I'm AfterMOON Horrors. Before we dive into the story, I want to know, where are you watching from and what time is it for you? It's always fascinating to see listeners tuning in from different places. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Story number 1. We were halfway between St. Louis and Springfield when the radio first said something we recognized. It wasn't a song, not a jingle, not static, just a sentence, sharp, clean, oddly familiar. "Let's stop after the next gas station. I got to pee so bad my teeth hurt." I said that. Yesterday. Right after we passed mile marker 122. Everyone in the van froze. There were 5 of us, our band, Maple Dogs, barely a few months into our first real tour. Indie rock, grunge-tinged, loud enough to mask our poor harmonies. There was Rick on bass, Jerry on drums, Lena on rhythm guitar, and Harper on lead vocals. I handled the keys and drove the night shifts. We weren't big yet, but we had fans in college towns and a couple radio stations playing our demo. We stared at the radio, now playing static. No music, no station ID, just fuzz. Rick leaned forward from the middle seat. "Was that?" "It was," I said. "Me, from yesterday." "Maybe someone's messing with a CB channel," Jerry offered. "Like, sampling us?" "No one's mic'd," Lena muttered. "We don't even have that gear in here." We all shrugged it off, kind of laughed, and drove on. Old vans pick up weird interference, right? But the next day we were somewhere near Joplin when it happened again. Same radio. Engine on. No cassette, no tuner. And then, "You said you were gonna quit drinking, but here we are." That was Harper. Quiet. Bitter, barely above a whisper. Last night in the motel parking lot when Rick pulled a flask from his sock. No one else had heard her. I was sitting nearby, and even I had to lean to catch it. But now the van played it back, clear as day, as if it had been recorded, then broadcast. This time no one laughed. Jerry turned the radio off. Harper, staring out the window, said nothing. We didn't say much after that. By the time we hit Tulsa, the radio had played 3 more lines, each from the previous day, each word for word accurate, each one with the same creeping effect. There was no musical static, no FM distortion, just our voices, always from the day before, never more than 5 seconds long. Still, we played the next show, and the next. That's the thing about being in a broke touring band. You don't have time to pause, no money to switch vehicles, no backup plan. But by the time we crossed into Arkansas, the rules changed. We were rolling past farmland, empty roads, and dying motels when the radio crackled on. No one had touched it. At first it played back what Jerry had said at lunch. "I'm so sick of playing to 3 drunks and a jukebox." We all recognized it. A line from the cafe that same afternoon, but then the radio said this. "I know what." "You did, Rick." Dead silence in the van. Harper's face went pale. Rick blinked, confused, but I saw the twitch in his jaw. Like his body had just heard something it didn't want his mouth to admit. "I didn't say that," Harper said slowly. "Not to him, not to anyone." "Is this some prank?" Rick snapped. "Did someone wire the van?" No one responded. Then the radio shut off. That night, no one slept right. Not even Jerry, who could usually pass out on cold tile. We barely spoke. Everyone sat with their own theories. Maybe the radio was picking up walkie-talkies. Maybe a shortwave scanner. Maybe someone bugged the van. But none of us said what we really felt. It knew things. The next morning, we tried to test it. We left the radio on all day, drove in silence, made casual conversation, and waited. Nothing happened. Until after sundown. Lena was dozing. Harper and Rick were in the back, heads turned away. Jerry was snoring quietly. Then the radio spoke again. "You should have told them about the girl in Dayton. I nearly crashed into the shoulder." "What girl?" I asked, gripping the wheel. Rick didn't answer. I turned. "What girl?" "Shut that thing off," Rick snapped. "No. Answer me." Harper was staring at him now, too. Eyes hard, unblinking. Rick looked like he wanted to crawl out of his own skin. "There was no girl," he mumbled, but it didn't feel like a denial. It felt like an old lie rehearsed too late. That was the night we pulled into a cheap roadside inn, and everyone finally cracked. Lena cried in the bathroom. Jerry chain-smoked on the curb. Harper and I sat on the bed in the dark. She looked at me like someone who knew there was no going back. "This van's not just repeating us," she said. "It's listening, maybe even thinking." "No machine thinks," I told her. "More to hear myself say it." "Yeah?" she asked. "Then how does it know what we never said?" We skipped the next show, then the one after that. Arguments started, tempers flared. The radio hadn't said anything since that night, but the damage had been done. Everyone was suspicious of everyone else. Lena thought Jerry was behind it. Jerry thought Rick had wired a prank for album content. I started checking the vans. Battery, the alternator, even the fuse box like that could explain it. But I knew, we all knew, something was wrong in that van. Still, we kept driving. That's the thing about people chasing dreams. We'll pretend a nightmare is part of the price. It all came to a head just before Memphis. We were parked outside a diner. Sun going down. The van radio was off, but we'd left the keys in the ignition. Rick went inside to get smokes, and the radio turned itself on. "I never meant to kill her," it said, clear as anything. But she wouldn't stop screaming. Harper covered her mouth. Lena bolted out the side door and vomited in the bushes. Jerry just sat still, staring at the dashboard. When Rick returned, we confronted him. "You left something out," Harper said. "In Dayton." Rick froze. Then he ran. Took off down the road behind the diner like he thought we were going to chase him. We didn't. He didn't come back. We sat in silence that night. None of us knew what to do. I wanted to call the cops. Harper told me not to. Said we didn't know what was true, what was planted, what was real. Said the moment we brought cops in, the tour was over, and we'd be under suspicion too. I hated it. But she was right. We drove the next few days with the radio ripped out. It didn't matter. The tape deck started speaking instead. Same voice, same effect. Only now, it wasn't even using recorded conversations. It just said things like, "He's not gone. He's hiding. He'll come back." Or worse, "You'll know what he did when it's too late." Or, "You should check the spare tire well. That last one?" That's what finally pushed us over the edge. We stopped in a truck lot. Pried open, the well beneath the trunk. It hadn't been touched in months, but what we found inside made my legs shake. A wallet. It wasn't Rick's. It belonged to a girl named Morgan Ellis, Dayton, Ohio, student ID. Maxed out bus card, and a receipt for a gas station, dated 2 weeks before we passed through. We never heard from Rick again. We gave the wallet to the police anonymously, left the van behind at the bus station in Little Rock, and took a Greyhound back to St. Louis. Harper called her cousin and got us picked up. No one spoke the entire ride. We never told the full truth to anyone, not even each other. But here's the part I haven't told anyone before. The last time I saw the van, it was still idling. Engine off, lights off. But the radio was glowing. No sound, just that orange digital glow, like it was waiting for us to leave. 2 days later, I got a call from a local shop. The van had been towed. then sold to a salvage lot. A man had bought it for parts. I didn't want to know more. But last week, after all these years, I saw a listing online, a classified post on some old musician forum, selling vintage Ford Econoline tour van. Great condition, upgraded sound system, radio works perfectly, picks up weird signals. That's when I knew it wasn't done. But I was. I don't tour anymore. I do production work now. Home studio, no travel, no vans. I take the train, and my radio stays off, because some echoes aren't supposed to come back. Some radios don't. Just listen. They remember, and when they start talking back, you'd better hope they're done with you. Story number 2. I didn't think twice when Laura said she wanted to drive down to Ilocos Norte for the long weekend. We'd been talking about a road trip for months. Something scenic, something quiet. Just us, some local food, an overnight stay, by the cliffs, and no signal. We both needed the break, me from editing deadlines, her from back-to-back shifts at the hospital. So when she messaged on Wednesday night with, "Pack a bag. We leave Friday," I said yes instantly. She borrowed her uncle's old Honda. I brought the playlists. By Saturday morning we were already several hours north of Manila, past the endless billboards and highway trucks, following the kind of winding, palm-lined roads that make you forget what time it is. Laura had a printed map in the glove compartment, but we weren't using it. No GPS. Just good old-fashioned asking directions and instincts. Around 3 p.m., somewhere outside a small barangay called Bacara, we hit a fork in the road. There weren't any signs. The left turn looked newer, paved even, but the right was overgrown, almost hidden by bamboo, and looked like it hadn't seen a car in months. "Take the right," Laura said suddenly, pointing. "At the blue tree." I slowed down. "What blue tree?" She leaned forward, squinting. "There, just past the curve. You'll see it." And weirdly, I did. A tree with gray bark and deep blue-green leaves, like something out of a painting. It stood out like it didn't belong, but what caught me wasn't the tree. It was Lara's tone. She said it like she'd been here before, like she knew what came next. I glanced at her. "You sure?" She nodded. "Trust me, I remember this." I laughed. "You said you've never been this far north." "I haven't," she said, frowning. "But I know this road." Something in her voice made the hair on my arms rise. Still, I turned right. The road narrowed, swallowed by thick forest. Light filtered through the trees in thin gold strips. My hands tightened on the wheel. 10 minutes in, I asked, "Where does this lead?" "There's a beach up ahead," she said calmly, "with flat rocks. You park beside the fisherman's hut." I blinked. "How do you know that?" "I don't know," she said, her voice suddenly distant. "But I remember walking there. It's where the tide pools are. There's one shaped like a heart." She was smiling now. Not at me, at the memory. Except she'd never been here, not once. I didn't say anything after that. I just kept driving, and every single thing she described appeared exactly as she said it would. The beach was empty. The rocks were flat. And yes, there was a heart-shaped tide pool filled with tiny crabs and warm water. We walked silently along the shoreline. I kept glancing at her. She wasn't acting scared, just strangely calm, like being here answered a question she didn't even know she had. That night, we stayed at a small bed and breakfast nearby. I barely slept. My mind kept replaying her words. "Turn right at the blue tree." In the morning, I found her already awake, staring at the sea, Her eyes were red. She looked like she'd been crying. "You okay?" I asked. She didn't look at me. I dreamed about this place for years since I was a kid. I sat beside her. "Why didn't you say anything yesterday?" "I didn't remember until we were on the road," she said. "But once I saw the tree, everything came back. It was like I'd lived here before, like I knew every rock." "You mean like déjà vu?" "No," she whispered. "Deeper, like it's part of me." We didn't talk much after that. The drive back was quieter. No music, no jokes. Something had shifted between us, though neither of us could name it. A week later, I decided to look into the area. Not out of suspicion, just curiosity. I wanted to know why a girl who had never been north of Tarlac knew where to find a fisherman's hut by a hidden beach no GPS could locate. I started with old maps, then local forums. Eventually, I stumbled on a piece written in 1995 for a regional publication. A feature on strange dreams and ancestral memories. One paragraph caught my eye. It mentioned a remote stretch of coast near Bakara known for blue-leafed trees and sacred tide pools. The locals believed these places held echoes, memories passed down not through DNA, but through something deeper, a kind of soul memory. The article mentioned that many of the families who lived there were displaced in the 1960s during a storm surge. Most relocated. Some never returned. One of the surnames listed Lara's mother's maiden name. I called her that night. "I think your family used to live near Bakara," I told her. "Way back, before you were born." She was quiet on the other end. Then she said, "My mom used to hum a song when I was a kid. She said her grandmother taught it to her. I never thought about it, but when we were walking on the beach, I started humming it without realizing. I felt a chill." "Do you think you were remembering her life?" "No," she said. "I think I was remembering mine." That was the first time Lara admitted she'd been having dreams. Not just recently. For years. Always the same. Standing on a beach, waiting for someone, a voice calling her name, a storm in the distance, and a feeling of unbearable sadness. I asked if she thought she had lived there in a past life. She hesitated, then said, "No, I don't think I died there. I think I left something behind." That night I couldn't sleep, so I dug deeper. Public records, church baptism logs, relocation documents. I found a girl, 9 years old, who drowned near Bakara in 1964 during a storm. Her name wasn't Lara, but her photo? It looked exactly like her. Same eyes, same dimples, same birthmark under the left collarbone. I showed it to Lara the next day. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she whispered, "That's me." We never brought it up again after that, not because we didn't believe it, but because some things don't need dissecting, they just are. But Lara changed after that trip. She started painting again, something she hadn't done since college. Her style shifted to coastal landscapes, always with a heart-shaped tide pool somewhere in the canvas. She said it helped her sleep. I asked her once if she thought the place had been calling her back. She said, "Not calling, waiting. It's been 15 years since that trip." Lara eventually moved north, not exactly to Bakara, but close enough that she could drive to the beach when she needed to. She opened a small art studio, teaches kids, and sometimes guides tourists to hidden spots off the map. I visit every year, and every time, without fail, we pass that same blue-leafed tree. She always smiles when she sees it, not like it's strange, but like it's home, and I believe her, because not everything we carry is from this life. Some places remember us too, and they wait, quietly, until we're ready to return. Story number 3. It was a dry Thursday evening in Cairo, 1990, and we were late. Again. The 4 of us had just gotten off the bus at Ramses Square, laughing too loud about something I can't even remember now. We were students at Ain Shams University, all crammed into a 2-bedroom flat in Shubra, barely making rent and somehow making every day feel like a challenge and a joke rolled into one. There was Kareem, the loud one, Mito, always serious but oddly good at imitating professors, Sameh, the quiet observer, and me, Omar, the reluctant leader because I was the one who could talk our way out of trouble when needed. We were walking back to our flat when Kareem almost stepped on it. "Yo!" he shouted, stopping short and pointing down. "Wallet." It was just lying there on the edge of the street, next to a battered lamppost. Brown leather, kind of dusty, no chain, no lock, just sitting there like someone had dropped it seconds earlier. Kareem picked it up immediately. "Maybe it's got cash," he said with a grin. "Or a dead guy's ID," Mito muttered. That was his kind of humor. Dark, pointless, and never funny, until hours later when it suddenly made you laugh. We gathered around while Kareem opened it. First thing inside, a national ID card. Male, Egyptian, late 20s. Name, Yehia Hassan Abdelmegwed. The odd part, the date printed in the bottom corner, next to the issue stamp, was tomorrow's date, May 25, 1990. It was only the 24th. We all noticed it at the same time. "No, this is wrong," Sameh said, tilting his head. "The printer must have made a mistake, but it wasn't just the ID. The wallet had a bus ticket too, dated May 25th, and a small folded receipt from a pharmacy stamped with May 25th, 1990, 09:11 a.m. We checked our watches. It was 7:44 p.m. on the 24th. "Okay, either this guy time-traveled," Mito said, deadpan, "or we're all idiots and it's already tomorrow." We double-checked with a newspaper seller nearby. May 24th. Confirmed. For the next 20 minutes we stood there, passing the wallet back and forth like it might catch fire. None of us were superstitious, but we also weren't stupid. Cairo had its share of scams, setups, and weird tales. Finding a wallet was nothing. But a wallet from the future? That wasn't on our list of evening plans. Eventually, we voted. I said we take it to the police. Kareem voted we keep it. At least until we figure out what's going on. Sameh said we return it if we can find the owner. Mito wanted to burn it. Democracy being what it was among broke students, we ended up taking it home. That night nobody really talked. The wallet sat in the middle of our old dining table like an uninvited guest. Nobody touched it again until around midnight, when Sameh pulled out a small notebook from inside it we hadn't noticed earlier. The pages were filled with neat, slanted Arabic writing, not diary entries, more like notes, but they weren't regular notes either. The first entry. "Tomorrow I will wait at the corner of 6th October Bridge. The bus will come. I must be on it. If I miss it again, she dies." "What the hell?" Kareem whispered. We flipped the pages. Each entry was dated a day ahead of the current date. Dozens of them. Some were vague. "Do not speak to the man in the gray coat." Others were clear. "Call home before 10:30 p.m. Say yes to the pharmacy. Job." Another one. "If the dog runs into the road, let it go. Don't follow." Sama closed the notebook. We all just stared at one another. For the next 2 hours, we argued. Was this a prank? A messed-up experiment? Someone's idea of performance art? I don't know what possessed me. But the next morning I went to 6th October Bridge alone. I didn't tell the others. I didn't want to admit how curious I was. And at 9:18 a.m., a man matching the ID photo in the wallet stepped off a bus. He looked around, confused, as if expecting someone. I don't know why, but I followed him. I stayed across the street, trying to be subtle, my heart pounding for no logical reason. He walked to a nearby payphone, tried to call someone, then cursed under his breath and kept walking. I shadowed him for about half an hour before he turned down a side street I didn't know and vanished into a building. That night, I told the others. Kareem was skeptical. Mito flat out said I was seeing things. But Same looked at me and said, "What if it's all real?" We didn't have smartphones back then. No Google, no GPS tracking. All we had was the notebook and each other's word. But we made a plan. Each of us would follow the next entry as if it were instructions, just to see what happened. We agreed to do this for 3 days. Day 1, Kareem followed his entry. Turn left on Talet Harb Street at exactly 1:13 p.m. Look for the red scarf. He did. He saw a woman trip near a fruit stand. She dropped her purse. Kareem caught it mid-air before it hit the ground. She thanked him and gave him a weird look. That night, she came to our flat. Turns out she lived 2 streets away and had seen Kareem around before. They started dating 2 weeks later. Day 2, Mito. His said, "Tell the professor you're sorry. He'll let you retake the quiz." He did. The professor, normally strict, looked surprised and handed him a blank paper. "You have 10 minutes. Day 3, Same. His said, "Buy the newspaper, page 3. Circle the ad." It was a job listing for a night shift courier. He applied. Got it. Same had been unemployed for 6 months. By the 4th day, we were terrified and obsessed. The notebook was clearly working, but we were also scared to go too far. What if it stopped working? What if it turned dark? We didn't sleep much, ate less, but I kept reading ahead. Then, on the 7th day, I found an entry with my name. Omar, do not take the call at 11:46 p.m. Let it ring. That night, the phone rang. I stared at it. Ringing, ringing. My hand trembled, but I let it ring. The next morning I found out my uncle had been arrested. He was caught making calls trying to frame someone for fraud. He used our number, pretending I'd be a witness. If I had picked up, I'd have been implicated. The wallet had saved me. We all sat in silence that night, watching the ceiling like it had answers. But then something changed. The entries started getting less helpful, less precise. The girl in the red shoes is lying. Don't eat the soup. You forgot the bus again. Idiot. Same was the first to notice. It's like it's not meant for us anymore. Kareem flipped to the end. And then he said it. There's only 1 page left. Tomorrow. We stared at it. It said, "I'm done. I can't keep doing this. If you found this, it means I failed." She died anyway. I kept trying, over and over. And I failed. I'm tired. Below. A final sentence. I hope someone else has better luck. None of us spoke for a long time. Then Kareem said what we were all thinking. This wasn't a notebook predicting the future. Sammy nodded. It was someone reliving it. The wallet, the ID, the bus ticket, all tools. Somehow this Yahia guy had found a way, maybe mental, maybe scientific, maybe just pure grief, to try again and again, to stop something from happening. And we had intercepted it. We argued for hours about what to do next. Burn it? Return it to where we found it? try. To find Yahia and tell him we had it? In the end, we placed the wallet in a small tin box, sealed it shut, and buried it near the Nile under a tree in a quiet park we used to visit during midterms. None of us spoke about it again, but in the years that followed, we all changed. Samashi eventually got married, said he kept the job until the signs stopped. Kareem and his red scarf girl broke up, but he always claimed she was the only honest thing I ever found. Mito moved to Canada. He says he still dreams about the notebook, says it tells him what not to do. And me? I stopped chasing stories that were easy, became a journalist who asks uncomfortable questions, especially about time, memory, and choice. Because in the end, what stayed with me wasn't the magic of the wallet or the creepiness of knowing the future. It was the tragedy. Yahia hadn't sent us a gift. He sent us a confession. He wasn't warning us. He was crying out, and somewhere, maybe in some version of Cairo we'll never see, he finally got it right. But here, he gave us one chance, and we used it, not to fix his life, but to rethink our own. Story number 4. It happened the summer after we graduated high school, when things were supposed to be simple. Just me and Corey, killing time before the world decided who we were going to be. I was working part-time at the gas station off Highway 2, saving up for college in Missoula. Corey was still figuring it out. He always said he'd leave Montana, but I don't think he ever really wanted to. We spent most days driving, back roads, hills, rail crossings, pretending like adventure was just around the corner. That day was dry and hot, one of those July afternoons where the air felt like it had been sitting still for weeks. We were heading toward an abandoned train yard we used to sneak into as kids, just for old times' sake. The road was empty for miles until we came up behind a beat-up blue station wagon going 10 under the speed limit. I was about to pass when Corey leaned forward and squinted through the windshield. "Hold on. What the hell?" he said, pointing at the car's bumper. There was a sticker, half-peeled, sun-faded, but clear enough to read. It said, in black marker over a white background, "Help me." But it wasn't the words that stopped me from laughing. It was the handwriting. It looked exactly like Corey's. Not similar, not, "Oh, wow, that's close." No, it was exact. The way he drew the capital H a little too tall, how the E leaned backward. I'd seen him write that way on notebooks, lockers, birthday cards. I would have bet money on it being his. We both stared at it, my hands tightening on the wheel. "Did you ever make that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "No," he said flatly. "Why would I? And why would it be on a random car in the middle of nowhere?" We drove behind it for a few more seconds. I kept thinking maybe it would turn or pull over or something, but it just kept going. Steady. Right down the road we were headed. Then I noticed something else. There was a shape in the back seat. Slumped. Not moving. Could have been a person. Could have been junk. But something about it, something in the way it leaned against the window, made my skin crawl. "We should call someone," I said. "And say what?" Corey shot back. "That a car has my handwriting on the bumper and maybe a person in the back?" I didn't answer. Instead, I sped up and pulled alongside the station wagon, trying to get a better look inside. The driver was a man, late 50s, maybe early 60s, balding with a faded flannel shirt. He didn't look at us, didn't even acknowledge we were there. His hands were at 10 and 2, eyes locked on the road like he was driving on rails. But then I saw the passenger. Iro was a woman. Her hair was dark and tied back, but her face was pale and blank, like she wasn't really seeing anything, and the shape in the back seat, it was a person, a kid, maybe 10 years old, eyes closed, head tilted at an unnatural angle. I slowed back down. "What the hell is going on?" I whispered. Corey was already dialing, but the signal was weak. We were too far out. Nothing went through. That's when the station wagon turned onto the gravel road leading to the train yard. "Are they following us?" I asked. Corey didn't answer. He was staring at the bumper again. "I wrote that," he muttered. "I swear to God, I wrote that when we were 12. Remember that summer we made fake bumper stickers and stuck them on your dad's truck?" That memory hit me like a slap. We did make fake bumper stickers. We wrote dumb stuff on blank stickers and dared each other to stick them on parked cars. I remembered the exact one he was talking about. "Help me" in all caps, because we thought it was hilarious at the time. We put it on an old Toyota in the lot behind the diner. "How would it still exist?" I asked. "It wouldn't," Corey said. "Unless—" He didn't finish. We followed them. I kept a few car lengths behind as the gravel crunched under our tires. The sun was starting to dip. The train yard came into view. Rusted tracks, graffitied boxcars, dead weeds. The wagon pulled up near one of the larger boxcars and parked. Then, nothing. No one got out. No movement inside. Corey and I stayed in the car. Silent. Finally, he said, "We should check it out." "Are you crazy? They've got a kid in there, man. What if they're in trouble?" I didn't want to. Every nerve in my body screamed to turn around. But he was right. If there was even a chance that someone needed help. We grabbed a flashlight from the glove box and got out. The air smelled like rust and dry grass. My shoes crunched broken glass. As we approached, I felt like I was walking through water, every step slower than the last. We circled around the car. It was empty. No driver, no woman, no kid. Doors locked. No sign of anyone leaving. No footprints, no sounds. Just the car, silent and still, and the bumper sticker right there. I leaned in closer. There, faint but still legible, were the words, "Help me," in Corey's unmistakable handwriting. He was pale now, breathing through his mouth. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "None of this makes any sense." We heard a noise then, from the train car, a soft metallic creak, like a door opening. We turned. The nearest boxcar door was open just a crack, a sliver of black in a wall of rusted red. "I'm not going in there," I said. Corey looked at me, his eyes filled with something between fear and obsession. "I think I have to." And before I could stop him, he was walking toward it. I followed, because I couldn't let him go alone. The inside of the boxcar was cold, darker than it should have been. Our flashlight flickered as we moved in. There was writing, all over the walls, dozens of messages, carved or written in marker. Most of them said the same thing, "Help me," over and over. Dozens, hundreds. Some small, some stretched across the walls, some fresh. Others faded, and one of them in my handwriting. I stared at it. My exact lettering. My lowercase e's, my way of curving the H. "I didn't do this," I said. Corey didn't answer. He was walking toward the far corner of the boxcar, where a table had been set up. On it, neatly arranged, were photos. Photos of us, from when we were kids, on bikes, at school, in the woods. Some were ones I'd never seen before. Angles no one could have taken. Like from inside my house. Behind my bedroom window. There was a cassette player next to the photos. Without a word, Corey hit play. A child's voice crackled through the speaker. "Help me. Please. Can anyone hear me?" Then static. Then silence. We stood there, frozen. Something moved outside. A quick shadow. We rushed out of the boxcar, spinning around, flashlights swinging wildly. But there was no one. Only the car. Still there. Still locked. Still empty. Except the back window now had something written in the fogged glass, like a finger had dragged through the condensation. It said, "You left me." Corey backed away. "No, no, I didn't. I never." The glass shattered. We ran, all the way back to the truck, jumped in, peeled out so fast I nearly hit a fence post. We didn't stop until we hit the main road again, breath heaving, dust choking us. We didn't talk for a long time. That night, Corey stayed at my place. Neither of us could sleep. At one point, he pulled out an old shoebox. Inside were childhood, photos, toys, scraps of paper, and one of the fake bumper stickers. The original one. "Help me," in his handwriting. He held it up. "This was the one," he whispered. "The one we made." I looked closer and saw faintly, written in pencil on the back, "You shouldn't have left." We never found that car again. We went back to the train yard a week later. The boxcar was empty, clean. No table, no photos, no writing, just rust and wind. We even filed a report, tried to explain what we saw. The sheriff wrote it off as a prank or heat stroke, said maybe someone found our sticker and used it to scare us. But that didn't explain the handwriting or the photos no one else could have taken. Corey changed after that. Started sleeping with the lights on. Wouldn't drive anywhere alone. One day he told me he remembered something. A kid we used to hang out with only for a few weeks. I barely remembered him. Name might have been Nathan or Nolan. He was quiet, liked trains. One day he just stopped coming around. Corey said we made fun of him, that we dared him to hide in one of the boxcars and wait till dark, and we never went back to check on him. I don't remember that, but Corey swore it happened. And sometimes I think I do remember just flashes. A boy waving from inside a train, us laughing, running off. If that's true, if we really left him there, then maybe someone or something remembered, and maybe it didn't want revenge. Maybe it just wanted to be seen, and maybe the worst part is that all it ever said was, "Help me." Story number 5. I rented the car because I needed a break from everything. I had just left a job I hated, ended a relationship that left me feeling more alone than when I was single, and my apartment lease in Toronto was up in 2 weeks. A solo. Weekend road trip to New York seemed like the kind of impulsive, liberating thing people in their 30s did to prove to themselves they were still in control of their lives. I booked the car online, paid for the insurance, and picked it up from a clean little rental center near Pearson Airport. It was a silver 2016 Toyota Camry, not flashy, not suspicious, and with fewer scratches than I expected. The guy at the counter gave me a quick walk-through, handed me the keys, and that was that. I got in, adjusted the seat, set my phone on the mount, and connected the Bluetooth. Then I noticed something odd. When I tapped the GPS screen to start entering my route, it already had some recent destinations stored. That happens sometimes with rentals. Employees forget to wipe the system. I didn't think much of it, but something about the list caught my attention. There weren't just a few addresses. There were dozens. Scrolling down, I realized it. Went on, showing trips logged in every year since at least 2001. The earliest entry read, April 2001, Saranac Lake, NY. That made no sense. This model of Camry didn't even exist in 2001. Out of curiosity, I kept scrolling. The dates were all in April. April 2002, Rockwood Conservation Area. April 2003, a random forest preserve near Rochester. It was always in early to mid-April, every single year, and always a destination near some wooded trail or remote spot. I paused for a second, thumb hovering over the Clear History button, but I didn't clear it. Instead, I took photos of the full list, screen by screen. Then I typed the first few locations into Google, just out of curiosity, and then I saw it. An article about a missing person, a 19-year-old girl named Marissa Clay. Last seen April 2001, headed toward a cabin near Saranac Lake. No remains ever found. I kept going. April 2002, a young woman named Jaya Singh disappeared from a trail near Rockwood. April 2003, a solo backpacker named Tara Huff went missing outside Rochester. I cross-checked every GPS entry with news articles and public missing person databases. 17 entries. 17 disappearances. All in April. One every year, without fail. I sat there in the rental lot, air conditioning humming, stomach twisting. It felt wrong, like I had stumbled onto something I wasn't supposed to see. But what did it mean? Was it coincidence? Was this car used by someone connected to those cases? No, that couldn't be right. The car was only 9 years old. Then I looked closer. The VN sticker on the inside of the door had something strange about it. It looked like it had been reapplied, a bit off-center. I snapped a photo of it and looked it up using a VN checking website. The result? The VN had originally belonged to a different car, a 2001 model, same color, which meant this wasn't just a reused car. It might have been rebuilt, re-registered, or more disturbingly, disguised. I pulled out of the lot anyway. I told myself I was overreacting, that this was just leftover data. But the deeper I went, the more it pulled at me. I drove through Ontario, across the border, stopped at Niagara Falls for a few hours to clear my head, and then pushed on toward New York. But I couldn't shake it. At my motel that night, I started mapping all the locations on my laptop. They weren't random. They formed a line, a pattern, a trail from northern Ontario down to rural Pennsylvania. It almost looked like migration, or a ritual. I didn't sleep much that night. The next day, instead of heading straight to Manhattan like I'd planned, I took a detour. I chose the most recent GPS entry. April 2017, Whitetail Pines, Catskills. It was a campground. Off-season, quiet. The gate was closed, but the road in wasn't blocked. I drove through slowly, watching the trees shift around me. When I got to the end of the gravel loop, I parked near a small, neglected picnic area and walked toward a clearing. It was still cold for April, patches of frost in the shadows. The place felt hollow, like whatever joy it once held had drained out years ago. There, at the edge of the woods, was a rusted fire ring. Something shiny caught my eye in the ashes, a metal chain, thin and delicate. I picked it up. It had a small pendant, a gold M. The same one I'd seen in a photo of a missing woman from the April 2017 case. Melissa Ward, age 22, disappeared while hiking solo. That was the moment I stopped pretending this was nothing. I got back in the car and drove straight to the nearest police station. I handed over my phone, my photos, my GPS logs. I told the officer everything. Probably too quickly, too nervously. She looked skeptical at first, like I was just another conspiracy theorist wasting time, but then she saw the necklace. She called someone, then someone else. Within 2 hours, detectives from New York State Police showed up. They kept the car, took it into evidence, thanked me, and told me they'd be in touch. I signed some forms, gave a statement, and was told I'd probably need to appear if anything came of it. I caught a bus back to Toronto that night. 3 weeks later, I got a call from a detective named Laura Marchand. She asked if I was alone, if I had a moment, and if I remembered the VIN I'd sent them. I said yes. She said the car's body had indeed been rebuilt, not once, but twice. The chassis was from a 2001 Camry, but it had been reshelled and updated to pass off as a newer model, a professional job, fake emissions tests, new registration, all clean, until now. Inside the car, under the passenger side carpet, forensics found an old flash drive wrapped in duct tape and tucked into a hidden compartment beneath the insulation. On it were 17 folders, each labeled with a name, each containing photos, documents, GPS logs, and sometimes audio clips. All of the missing women, their full names, their last known locations. In some cases, unreleased photos from the days they vanished, and one final folder labeled Next. April 2018, it had coordinates for a small lake in Vermont. My name wasn't in that folder, but someone's was. A woman who had just gone missing 3 days before I rented the car. Her case hadn't hit the media yet. Her name was Rebecca Dawes, 32, solo traveler. Left home April 11th for a weekend getaway. Never checked into her hotel. She'd been in the car before me. Laura said that the investigation had now expanded to multiple jurisdictions, that the car had changed hands through 5 different rental agencies, all under shell companies, that whoever orchestrated this had used rental logs to move unseen for years. They didn't know if it was one person or a network, but the files were real. The disappearances were real. And now, thanks to my curiosity, they finally had a lead. I asked what they thought the motive was. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Some of the audio files include voices. It sounds like interviews. The suspect asking questions, collecting stories. We think it started as obsession, then documentation, then something darker. We're still decoding the drive." Before she hung up, she said something that stuck with me. "You were supposed to be next, you know. If you hadn't spoken up, if you'd gone to that lake—" She didn't need to finish. I sat there with the phone still pressed to my ear long after the call ended. I hadn't told anyone this whole story, not my parents, not my friends, not even my therapist. It didn't feel like something you casually drop into conversation. Hey, I think I almost became the next victim in a 17-year-long string of disappearances connected to a single car. But I've told it now, because the case went public a few months later, and people started asking questions. They wanted to know who broke it, how, why. It wasn't bravery. It wasn't instinct. It was just attention to detail, curiosity, and dumb luck. I wanted a break from life. Instead, I broke a pattern that had lasted nearly 2 decades. The car was destroyed after the investigation ended. I was told this by the officer who called to thank me personally. "We didn't want it ending up on another lot," she said. "No more ghosts riding in the back seat. I still don't know who did it, or why they chose April, but I know that someone, or something, was very deliberate. A predator hiding in logistics, moving through paperwork and rented vehicles, and I had rented their final move. Afterward, I never rented another car again. I took trains, walked more, and I paid closer attention to things other people ignore. Sometimes, the quietest machines carry the loudest secrets, and sometimes the most ordinary trip saves your life.
Story 6.
We didn't plan the trip to fix things. Not really. We said we did, told ourselves it was a last shot at rekindling whatever love had been buried beneath years of quiet resentment. But deep down, I think we both knew it was an escape, a way to spend a few days pretending we were still trying, before admitting we had nothing left. Northern Italy in the fall was beautiful, gold vines in the hills, cold air whispering through sleepy towns. We rented a beat-up old Fiat from a family-owned garage in a village outside Bologna. It had character. That's what I told myself when the glove box jammed and the heater coughed like it had asthma. But it ran, and that was enough. Elena and I didn't speak much the first day. She stared out the window, arms crossed. I focused on the road, trying to remember a time when silence between us felt comfortable instead of heavy. We drove past olive fields and shuttered villas, pulling into small towns where people still waved at strangers. At night, we shared motel beds with folded towels shaped like swans, slept back to back without touching. On the third morning, we were somewhere along the SP44, winding through the foothills near a town I can't remember, when I heard the clicking, a soft, rhythmic tick-tick-tick, like an old mechanical camera trying to wind itself. It came from under my seat. I pulled over, opened the door, and crouched to look. And that's when I found it, a black plastic recorder, the kind you'd find in an office meeting back in the 80s. Dusty, but intact. It wasn't plugged in. No label, no markings, just a single tape already inside. The weirdest part? There were no wires, no way it could have been transmitting. Just a recorder. Manual. "Elena," I called out, holding it up. She came around, squinting at it. "That's not ours." I know. We stood there by the side of the road, the wind rattling the olive branches above, and stared at the little device. I popped the tape out and turned it over in my hands. No label, just a faint smudge on one side like someone had rubbed off writing. I hit play. Static at first, then voices. Our voices, Elena's, angry, sharp, and mine. Flat, sarcastic. The argument was intense, intimate, bitter. It was about the miscarriage we never talked about, the one from 2 years ago. She accused me of disappearing emotionally. I told her she made everything about her grief. But here's the thing, we'd never said those words, not out loud, not like that. "Elena, you remember this?" I asked, rewinding a few seconds. "Did we ever actually have this fight?" Her face had gone pale. She shook her head slowly, mouth slightly open. "No, I remember thinking those things, but I never said them." We sat in the car for nearly an hour, playing the tape. It was all arguments, every track, every reel, different topics, same voices, fights about trust, money, children, our parents, our friends, all the ugliest versions of us, words we'd swallowed, thoughts we'd buried, private things, real, but unspoken, I used. "To imagine what you'd say if you knew how much I hated you," Elena whispered, as another track ended with the sound of something breaking, glass or ceramic. But I never said it. I never even admitted it to myself. Neither of us could explain it. Rationally, it didn't make sense. There was no way this recorder could have accessed our minds, let alone recorded what we hadn't spoken. But it was. Proof. Over and over. The unspoken turned to sound. That night we stayed in a quiet mountain inn. Neither of us wanted to admit it, but we kept the recorder on the nightstand, like we were afraid of leaving it alone. We didn't speak much, but I watched her watching me. The next morning another tape was inside. We hadn't touched it. Elena swore she didn't either. We played it. This time the argument was different. It hadn't happened. But it would. That evening, around sunset, we pulled off at a scenic overlook. The view was beautiful, miles of gold and gray. I mentioned something small, stupid really. How she always packed too many things. She snapped at me, said I always criticized. I told her she was oversensitive. Word for word, it became the fight, on the tape. Every sentence, every insult. It was like a prophecy. A script we were reading from without knowing, and it broke something in us. We drove the next few hours in silence. Not the resentful kind anymore, just numb. Elena, I said eventually, voice dry, do you think someone planted this? As a prank? No prank would be this cruel, she said. It's like the car wants us to break apart. I didn't laugh. That night she cried in the bathroom with the door closed. I pretended not to hear. I laid in bed, staring at the recorder on the nightstand. There was another tape inside. I didn't play it. Not then. The next morning, she asked if we should turn around. I said no. We were already this far in. Might as well see it through. It wasn't until mid-afternoon that I gave in and played the tape. It was a fight, but not between us. It was Elena, alone, crying, talking to someone. Her sister? Maybe a therapist? She talked about me, about how lonely she felt, how I didn't listen, how she sometimes imagined packing a bag, driving off, not telling me. It wasn't an argument, but it was something real. Something she'd said to someone else. Elena, I asked gently, did you ever talk to anyone about leaving me? She looked at me for a long time, then nodded. Only once. I nodded too. I didn't get angry, because I had my own secrets, my own private thoughts. The recorder didn't care whether it was a fight or a confession. It just pulled them all out. By the fifth day, the recorder had a pile of tapes. We stopped trying to explain it. We just kept driving. Small towns blurred into one another. We kept the windows down, ate in silence, slept close, but not touching. And still, every night, a new tape, always filled with truths neither of us had said. One morning, Elena turned to me and asked, "What happens when it runs out?" "What do you mean?" "The tapes. When it finishes. What then?" I didn't have an answer. I don't think it mattered, because the next tape changed everything. It wasn't a fight. It was us. Not present-day us. Not even past us. Future. Our voices, but older. Tired. Bitter. We were in a courtroom, talking about divorce terms, custody of a dog we hadn't even adopted yet. I accused her of being cold, selfish. She accused me of emotional abandonment. It sounded real, like a recording taken from a decade in the future. We listened to the whole thing, and when it ended, she turned it off and didn't say a word. That night she kissed me on the shoulder for the first time in months. "I don't want that future," she whispered. "Me either," I said. The next day we left the recorder in a bin behind a roadside chapel. We didn't talk about it, just tossed it in with some broken toys and used books. I remember thinking someone else would find it. Maybe it would help them. Maybe it would ruin them. I didn't care. The car felt lighter after that. The air didn't hum with tension. We started, talking again, not about the recorder, but about us, the past, the cracks, the things we were too proud to say before. We didn't fix everything. That would take years. But we started. We held hands as we crossed into Switzerland. She leaned her head against the window, and I felt something that had been gone a long time. Relief. Not love, not yet. but the possibility of love. Again. We returned the car in Milan and flew home 2 days later. When we got back, we went to counseling. Real counseling. We didn't tell anyone about the recorder. How could we? Who would believe it? Sometimes I wonder if the recorder was ever really there. If we imagined it, two tired people projecting their fears onto plastic and tape. But I remember the sounds, I remember the words, and I remember that last tape, the courtroom, the future. We didn't end up there. We stayed together. We adopted that dog, by the way. Her name's Olive. And sometimes, when she's asleep between us and Elena is reading in bed beside me, I think about the road, the car, the way our worst selves were laid bare, not to break us, but to warn us. Maybe that was the point all along. Not horror, not madness, just honesty, unavoidable, unfiltered, undeniable. And somehow, because of that, we found a way back. Story number 7. I was 8 years old when I met Corey. My parents had just moved us to a quiet suburb in Perth, and everything felt unfamiliar. New school, new street, new faces. Corey lived 2 houses down, and he was the first kid my age who invited me over after school. He was quiet, a little odd maybe, but at 8, you don't notice the strange things that adults do. You just care if someone has video games and snacks. Corey had both. His house was older than the rest on the block, kind of dark inside, with creaky floors and that smell old carpet has when it's been walked on for decades. But his parents were nice enough, even if they kept to themselves and didn't talk much. I remember his mom always wore long sleeves, even on warm days, and his dad never smiled, but that didn't mean anything to me back then. The first time I went over, Corey showed me his Nintendo and we played for hours. I don't think either of us said much during those games, which was fine by me. I was shy. But on my 3rd or 4th visit, something changed. We were playing Mario Kart, and Corey suddenly paused the game, turned to me and said, "Want to see something cool?" I thought he meant a new game or some secret collection of action figures, so I nodded. He led me past the living room and down the stairs into the basement, which was colder and darker than the rest of the house. I hesitated at the top, but he looked back and said, "Come on, it's just downstairs." I followed. The basement was mostly empty except for some broken furniture, old boxes and shelves with what looked like jars of bolts and nails. One of the walls didn't match the others. It was wooden, while the others were made of brick. Corey walked straight up to it and knocked twice on a part that looked like a panel. Then he pushed. The wood creaked open like a door, revealing a small, narrow space behind it. "This is my secret room," he said. I remember feeling a little thrill, like we were on some spy mission. Every kid dreams of having a secret base or hidden lair, but the feeling didn't last long. It wasn't much of a room, more like a long closet, maybe 5 feet deep and barely wide enough for the 2 of us. There were old blankets on the ground, a small flashlight, and boxes filled with junk, magazines, broken toys, and some weird drawings on scrap paper. I remember those drawings clearly. They looked like kids with red X's over their eyes. One of them had a knife drawn into its stomach. I asked Corey what they were, trying to sound casual. He just shrugged and said, "It's a game I made up." That didn't make much sense, but I didn't question it. Kids draw weird things all the time. I laughed nervously and looked around more. That's when I noticed the box at the back. It was wooden, with metal clasps and a padlock that had been broken open. Corey didn't stop me when I reached for it. Inside were dolls, old, dirty dolls, some missing limbs or eyes. But they weren't just dolls. Each one had a name tag taped to it: Ella, Mark, Tommy, Sarah. I asked who they were. Corey looked at me and said in a flat voice, "My friends." I smiled awkwardly, thinking maybe he was just pretending. "Cool," I said, trying to play along. "But," then he added, "they were bad friends. You won't be bad, will you?" I laughed again, this time more uncomfortable than before. "No," I said, "I'm a good friend." I meant it as a joke, but Corey didn't laugh. He just kept staring. After that, I said I had to go home for dinner. Corey didn't follow me up the stairs. He just stayed down there looking at his dolls. I told my mom I didn't feel like going back the next day. She asked why, and I didn't know how to explain it without sounding silly. I said we got bored of the same games. A few days later, Corey showed up at our front door. My dad answered. Corey stood there, smiling weirdly, holding one of the dolls, the one labeled Mark. He said he brought a gift for me. My dad thanked him politely, took the doll, and said I wasn't feeling well. Corey didn't ask to come in. He just stood there for a moment, then walked away. That night my dad put the doll on the top shelf, in the garage. I didn't sleep well. About a week later, Corey's name came up on the news. His mother had called the police after she'd found something in the basement she didn't understand. Apparently she'd been cleaning and found a second, even smaller hidden space inside the first one. That's where they found a collection of shoelaces, zip ties, and a pair of scissors wrapped in cloth. There were also audio tapes, dozens of them. The police never released what was on them publicly, but it was serious enough that Corey was removed from the home the next morning. At school, his desk stayed empty for weeks. The principal came to our classroom one day and said Corey wouldn't be returning due to a family relocation. Most kids didn't ask questions. But I overheard two teachers whispering in the hallway. One of them said, "It's a miracle that boy hadn't hurt anyone yet." The other replied, "That we know of." My parents sat me down that night and asked if Corey had ever shown me anything strange. I hesitated, but I told them about the basement room, the dolls, and the drawings. My mom's hand started shaking halfway through. My dad looked furious but didn't say anything. The next morning the police visited us. I talked to them for a long time. They asked if Corey ever touched me, ever said anything threatening. I said no, and it was the truth. Corey never laid a hand on me. He never raised his voice. He just watched, always watched. Eventually things quieted down. We never found out where Corey was sent. My parents never let me walk home alone again, and I never played in anyone's basement after that. But the worst part came 3 years later. I was in year 6 when I got a package in the mail. No return address, just my name, carefully written in block letters. Inside was a small wooden box, and inside, that was a doll. The tag on it said, "Jack, that's my name." We called the police again. They took it seriously this time, even brought the box in for testing. But nothing ever came of it. No fingerprints, no leads. They said it could have been a prank, maybe even someone from school, but I knew it wasn't. I never told anyone about the doll's name tags. Only Corey knew that. Years passed. I grew up, moved out, got a job, tried to forget. But there are still nights I wake up and think about that room, about what was inside, that second hidden space I never saw. I think about how close I came to being another doll in that box. Another name on a list only Corey understood. Sometimes I wonder if he remembers me the way I remember him. I wonder if, wherever he is, he's still making new dolls, or if I'm the one he's saving for last. Story number 8. I was 14 the year it happened, and to this day, I still have trouble explaining it without people thinking I'm exaggerating. I wasn't. I was just a quiet kid in a quiet town, and like most families in Salt Lake, we went to church every Sunday without fail. That was where I met Peter Langford. He was one of those kids everyone liked. Polite, well-groomed, soft-spoken, always knew the right verse, always brought extra snacks, always offered to help carry folding chairs or pass out hymnals. He didn't stand out in a bad way. In fact, he barely stood out at all, until he did. My dad was one of the assistant pastors, which meant I had to be at church earlier than most. I'd sit in the back while they prepped the sermon, fiddling with the ancient cassette recorder we used to tape the services. I liked hearing how the crowd responded to certain moments. When people laughed, when they fell silent, I'd replay the tapes at home sometimes, not because I was that devout, but because it was kinda cool hearing the reactions. I didn't know those tapes would eventually uncover something none of us could explain. It started with a whisper, literally. During playback of the sermon from 2 Sundays ago, I noticed something off. In the middle of Dad's message on forgiveness, I heard a breathy voice behind his, almost layered beneath it. It was so faint, I thought it was a glitch at first, but then the voice said something. Not random, not nonsense. It said, "Do you believe that lie?" Then silence. Then more of Dad's sermon. I rewound it 5 times. It was always there, clearer than before. The same voice, the same sentence, spoken in a way that chilled me to my stomach. I didn't tell Dad. I told Peter. We were in the youth room, playing chess. He leaned forward and asked me to repeat what I'd heard. I did. He didn't react. Just looked at me like he was thinking about something complicated. Then he said, "Maybe someone's testing you." I thought he meant God. I didn't ask him to clarify. The next week I recorded again. This time the whisper was bolder. It didn't interrupt the sermon. It altered it. When Pastor Eric said, "We should turn the other cheek," the playback said, "We should turn to violence." I almost dropped the player. It was seamless. The edit perfect, like Pastor Eric had said it himself. But he hadn't. I was there. I knew what he said. And I knew that voice wasn't his. That Sunday night I went through the old tapes in the storage cabinet at church. Dozens of them. I picked a random one from a few months ago, played it, static, normal sermon, then mid-sentence, a phrase sliced through. "They don't know what's coming." I froze. I played 3 more tapes. All had something hidden in them. Threats, accusations, sometimes laughter. I couldn't believe it. Who would do this? And how? I told Peter again. He asked if anyone else knew. I said no. He nodded slowly and said, "Good. Don't tell anyone. You don't want to cause panic." That should have raised red flags. But he said it with such calm that I thought maybe he was right. Maybe if I told someone, they'd think I was doing it. I couldn't stop listening to the tapes. I started, bringing them home, playing them late at night with headphones on. I began to notice patterns. The voice didn't just randomly comment. It changed messages, subtly, strategically. A sermon about peace would become one about suspicion. A sermon about giving became about taking what you deserved. It was all said in a soothing tone, but the words twisted the original meaning. I knew these edits couldn't have happened by accident. Someone was tampering with them, and that someone had access to the master recordings. One night I decided to stay late. Everyone had left after evening service. I told Dad I was staying, to help clean up. He tossed me the keys and left. Around 10 p.m., I snuck into the AV booth and waited. If someone was changing the tapes, maybe they'd come tonight. Maybe I'd catch them. It was nearly midnight when I heard the door creak. I was behind the curtain, barely breathing. I watched as someone moved into the booth and sat down. They moved like they belonged there, like they'd done this many times. I couldn't see the face yet, just the back of the head. Brown hair, neat, slim shoulders, a church youth sweatshirt. And then he turned slightly, and I saw Peter's face lit by the soft glow of the recorder's tiny LED screen. I didn't move. I couldn't. He didn't look like someone doing something wrong. He looked peaceful, focused. He had a small notepad and he was marking timestamps, rewinding, fast-forwarding, pressing buttons. I didn't hear his voice, but I could see his mouth moving, like he was rehearsing what he'd say. I stayed, frozen until he packed up and left. The next morning, I didn't talk to him. I skipped chess, avoided his gaze. But he found me later in the hallway, told me he'd found something in one of the older tapes, said I should hear it. I didn't respond. He stared at me for a long time and said, "Secrets are holy, you know. They make you powerful." Then he smiled and walked away. I went to my dad. I broke down and told him everything. The altered tapes, the whispers, Peter. He didn't believe me at first, thought I was imagining things. But when I played one of the tapes in front of him, the one where the sermon says, "Sin should be celebrated," he turned pale. That wasn't his voice, but it was his cadence, his inflection. Peter had somehow replicated him perfectly. Within a week, the police were involved. They found a box in the youth room's back closet hidden behind old decorations. Inside were modified cassettes labeled with dates and cryptic words like obey, infiltrate, and cleanse. There were scripts, written scripts, for fake sermons. Lines copied out like movie dialogue, ready to be dubbed over. Peter denied everything, said he didn't know what we were talking about, smiled through the whole questioning, even told my dad, "Sometimes the message isn't what you think it is. Sometimes it needs a new voice." They couldn't charge him with much. No one got hurt. But the church banned him. His parents pulled him out of school. They moved within the month. No goodbye, no explanation. Just gone. Months passed. Things settled. The tapes were destroyed. We moved to a digital system. But it never really went away. One Sunday, a new file appeared on my dad's computer. It wasn't from the sound team. It was titled, "Listen Closely MP3. He almost deleted it, but I asked him to let me hear it first. It was Peter. I knew that voice anywhere. He said, "They silenced me, but you heard me first. You listened. That makes you the next messenger." That was the last time we ever played a sermon out loud in our house. I've gone on with my life. College, work, moved states, started over. But once in a while, I'll get an unmarked envelope in the mail. No return address, just a cassette inside. I don't play them. I burn them. Every single time. But I still wonder, who's listening to me now? Story number 9. She sat 2 rows in front of me, near the windows. Small, pale, and too quiet for her age. Her name was Leah. We were both in 6th grade at École Bonaparte in Paris, and though I can't remember most of my classmates, I remember her. It wasn't just the way she always sat alone, or the way she stared at people longer than necessary. It was what happened the week after the fire drill. It started as a normal Thursday. Our art teacher, Madame Roux, had us sketch something emotional. Most of us drew sad faces or storm clouds. Leah, on the other hand, drew a picture that made Madame Roux freeze mid-step. She stood there, blinking at it, before pulling Leah aside. I didn't hear what they talked about, but I saw Madame fold the drawing and place it in her bag instead of letting Leah take it home like the rest of us. The next day, we had a substitute. We were told Madame Roux had a family emergency. That same morning, Leah left a folded paper on my desk while I was sharpening my pencil. I opened it without thinking. It was a drawing, me, clearly me, falling down a staircase, my arms flailing, mouth wide in a scream. What made it worse was the way she'd drawn the surroundings. The school's stone staircase, the banister, the cracked third step. It was accurate, unsettlingly so. I looked up at her, confused, expecting a smirk or some kind of prank-like expression. But she wasn't even looking at me, just calmly drawing something else at her desk. At lunch I showed it to a few friends. They thought it was hilarious. Hugo joked I should wear knee pads to class, but I couldn't shake the unease. It felt too specific to be random. Still, I told myself it was just a weird coincidence. Maybe she'd seen me stumble a few times. I was clumsy. That weekend I tossed the drawing into a kitchen drawer and forgot about it. 3 days later, I fell. It was after school. I had stayed behind for detention. Nothing serious, just talking too much in class. I was hurrying down the main staircase to catch my bus when I tripped on the cracked third step. I remember the way my foot twisted, how my balance vanished, in an instant. I flew forward, slammed into the banister, then tumbled down hard. I blacked out halfway through and woke up in a hospital bed with a cast on my arm, 6 stitches above my eyebrow, and a ringing in my left ear. They said I was lucky. The first thing I thought of was that drawing. I didn't say anything, not to the nurse, not to my mom. But the moment I got home, I limped straight to the drawer and pulled it out. Same angle, same crack in the step. Even the blood near the eyebrow. It was in the drawing. I stared at it for a long time, this time realizing something I hadn't noticed before. At the bottom corner, Leia had drawn a second figure, herself, standing at the top of the stairs, arms folded behind her back. I didn't sleep that night. Back at school, Leia didn't say a word to me. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't smile, didn't frown, just looked at me like nothing had happened. I tried to talk to her once, just to test the water. "Why did you draw that picture?" She blinked slowly, tilting her head slightly. "Because it happened." "But you drew it before it did." "Did I?" That was all she said. I tried to forget it. I really did. I told myself it was all in my head, that the drawing had been some strange coincidence and I was projecting meaning onto it after the fact. But then Madame Roux never came back. Weeks passed, then months. A rumor spread that she'd suffered a breakdown. Some said it had something to do with Leia. Others claimed she left the country. Leia didn't draw for a while after that, at least not in class. But in late spring, I saw her sketching again during recess, huddled alone behind the equipment shed. I crept closer, pretending to tie my shoe. I saw another drawing, someone else falling. Not me this time. It was Hugo. A week later, Hugo broke, his wrist playing soccer. He said he slipped in a weird way, like someone had pulled his foot mid-kick. It was freakishly similar to the way she'd drawn it. Same outstretched hand, same leg twisted. I didn't say anything. Who would believe? Me? By June, 3 more kids had suffered minor accidents. A broken collarbone, a concussion from hitting a desk. A girl fainted and cracked a tooth. I kept watching Leia, watching who she watched, watching what she drew. Then it stopped. She didn't return the next year. Her desk stayed empty until winter break, when they finally moved her nameplate. No one really knew why she left. Her parents never answered calls, and no forwarding address was given. I grew up. I moved on, or at least I thought I did. But earlier this year, I was cleaning out my parents' attic before their house went on sale. Tucked in a box of old schoolbooks and projects, I found that same drawing again. I should have thrown it out. I almost did. But something made me keep it. Not fear, curiosity. I wondered if maybe I'd exaggerated the whole thing, misremembered. Then I flipped it over. There was writing on the back. Small, neat cursive in pencil. He deserved it. I never showed anyone that. Not until now. That one sentence changed everything. It made me look at myself differently, because the truth is, I had made fun of her. Not outright bullying, but the kind of subtle cruelty kids are capable of. Whispered jokes, calling her Ghost Girl. I laughed when someone put a fake bug in her desk. I rolled my eyes when she tried to read her poetry aloud in French class. I wasn't innocent, and neither were the others. Every name I could remember, from her sketches, all of them had mocked her at some point. I started writing them down, checking old yearbooks, digging through social media. The more I searched, the more I saw a pattern. Accidents, injuries, a few people who'd dropped out, one who ended up institutionalized. It was like a web that she had spun years ago, slowly tightening. But here's the part I can't explain. Last month, I got a letter. No return address. Paris postmark. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A drawing. Just pencil on white paper. Like before, me, older now, sitting in front of a computer, eyes wide in fear. Behind me, a tall bookshelf tipping forward. Midfall. About to crush me. My hands were raised in panic. My mouth open. The details were perfect. Even the books on the shelf were labeled. One of them, at the top corner, had my name written on. The spine. I laughed at first. Nervous laugh, but still. My brain instantly said it was a prank. An old friend messing with me. But I don't have that kind of friend. And I moved out of Paris 5 years ago. The address was current, private, only on 2 bank forms and my voter ID. That night I moved the shelf away from the wall and bolted it with anchors. A week later there was an earthquake, minor, according to the news. A tremor. My building swayed. Nothing major fell. Nothing broke, except that shelf. The anchors failed. It tilted, slow at first, then crashed straight into my chair. I wasn't in it. I had gone to the kitchen 2 minutes before. The drawing is now in a sealed plastic folder in my desk drawer. I haven't heard from her since. I don't know where she is. I don't know what she wants. Maybe nothing. Maybe it's all in my head. But if I ever get another drawing, I won't ignore it. Story number 10. I moved into the apartment on a Wednesday. It was early February, cold but not freezing, and I was just relieved to find something affordable and decently close to work. The building was old, one of those boxy Seattle structures that hadn't been renovated since the late 80s, but it was clean, and the landlady, Mrs. Ellen Granger, seemed polite enough when she handed me the keys. She was in her 60s, maybe older, small, wiry, and always wearing those thick, rounded glasses that made her eyes look cartoonishly large. She lived in the unit directly below mine, and she made a point of telling me how thin the walls were. "You'll want to keep your music low," she said as I signed the lease. "I don't mind some noise, but just be mindful." I wasn't planning to throw parties or play guitar at 2 a.m., so I nodded and thanked her. Honestly, I felt lucky. The rent was low, the neighbors were quiet, and I had my own space. At first it felt like a fresh start. That lasted about a week. It started with small things, little moments that I brushed off. I'd come home from work and feel like something had shifted slightly. My bathroom rug looked a bit off-center. A cup I'd left on the kitchen counter was in the sink. One time, my bedroom light was on when I was sure I'd turned it off. I chalked it up to being forgetful. Moving stress, maybe. But then, at night, I started hearing noises in the vent above my bed. Scraping, faint tapping, almost like breathing. First, I assumed it was just the old building settling, or maybe some kind of rodent problem. But the sound wasn't random. It always started around midnight, and it always stopped the second I made a noise, like shifting in bed or clearing my throat. That's when it clicked that the sound wasn't coming from inside the vent. It was coming through the vent. Someone was on the other side. The vent wasn't like the typical metal grates you can pop off with a screwdriver. It was built into the wall, above the headboard, small and square, covered with a fine metal mesh. I stood on my mattress one night and stared into it. I couldn't see anything, just black. But I felt something, not a draft, something more conscious, like being watched. I didn't sleep much after that. I started using earbuds, blasting white noise into my ears just to get a few hours of rest. I considered complaining to Mrs. Granger, but what would I say? I think someone is watching me through the vent? She already warned me about the thin walls. Maybe she'd just think I was paranoid. Then, on a Thursday night after work, I noticed something new. My sock drawer was open. That drawer sticks a little. It takes effort to pull it all the way out. I hadn't opened it in days. That's when the panic started creeping in. I checked all my windows. Locked. The door too. No sign of forced entry. Still, I felt exposed, vulnerable, so I bought a cheap security camera and pointed it at the vent. I didn't even tell anyone. I was embarrassed, honestly, but I needed to know. I left it recording overnight, didn't sleep a wink, just lay there pretending to while my heart hammered in my chest. The next morning, I reviewed the footage. At 2:13 a.m., the mesh in the vent shifted, just slightly, enough to see a sliver of movement behind it, a flash of skin, and then an eye. A single eye, staring through the vent into my room, watching me. I froze. It was unmistakable. Someone was on the other side of that wall. Not a ghost, not a raccoon, not my imagination. A person. I called the police. They arrived in less than 20 minutes. I showed them the footage, explained what I'd been hearing and noticing. To their credit, they took it seriously. They asked me to step outside while they investigated. I stood on the street in my hoodie, hands shaking, watching two uniformed officers disappear into my building. They were inside for maybe 15 minutes before one of them returned. "You said your landlady lives in the unit below you?" I nodded. "She says no one else has access to the crawl space behind the vents, but there's a hatch in her unit. Locked, supposedly." Supposedly? They questioned her. I could hear her voice through the stairwell. Offended, defensive, almost rehearsed. "I'm an old woman, for God's sake. What would I be doing crawling through vents?" But the hatch was there, and it wasn't locked. They found a narrow maintenance tunnel that snaked along the top floor units. It was dusty, unfinished, and just barely wide enough for someone to crawl through. It led directly behind the vent in my bedroom, and they found something else. A notebook. It was old and worn, the cover stained with fingerprints and what looked like coffee. Inside were handwritten notes, pages and pages of them, descriptions, observations, names. The first entry was dated 5 years earlier. The last one, it was from the previous night. Subject still sleeps with head facing north. Turns every 45 minutes. Talks in sleep sometimes. Mostly unintelligible. No phone calls today. Spent 11 minutes crying around 6:45 p.m. Maybe homesick. That entry was about me. The police brought her in for questioning. She denied everything, claimed she'd never seen the notebook before, said maybe it belonged to the previous tenant. Maybe someone else had broken in and used the crawl space without her knowledge. But the handwriting matched hers. There were other notebooks, too, stashed in a locked cabinet in her unit. She'd been doing this for years, watching, writing, recording. Apparently, she had keys to every apartment in the building. The official charge was criminal trespassing and unlawful surveillance. There wasn't enough to prove intent beyond that. No cameras, no physical harm, just the sickening, suffocating knowledge that she had been there, listening, watching, knowing me in ways no one should. I moved out that weekend. Even now, a year later, I still find myself checking vents in hotel rooms, tapping on walls when I visit friends. I use masking tape on every door frame just to see if it gets disturbed while I'm out. I wish I could say therapy helped, but it only did so much. The violation wasn't just physical, it was mental, intimate. I've since read that people, like her, often don't see themselves as predators. They think they're researchers, observers, as if detaching themselves from emotion makes it all okay. But I felt it. The emotion behind those pages. The obsession. She didn't just watch me because she was lonely or curious. She watched because she liked it. She liked the control, the secrecy. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't installed that camera. How long would it have gone on? What was her end game? But then I remember something she said when I first moved in, offhand, like a joke. You'll want to keep your curtains closed at night. There's all kinds of people in this city. She wasn't warning me about them. She was warning me about herself. Story number 11. When I moved to Manchester in 2020, I wasn't looking for anything special, just a clean, affordable place to stay while I started my new job. I was 26, single, and still trying to find my footing in a new city. The flat, I found, was nothing fancy, but it was safe and quiet, tucked away on a side street near the city center. The room was small, the rent reasonable, and most importantly, I didn't have to sign a long-term lease. The only catch was sharing the space with someone else. Her name was Evelyn. She was already living there when I moved in. We were about the same age, both working adults, and she seemed friendly enough. A bit quiet, maybe too much so, but I chalked it up to personality. She worked from home as a freelance illustrator, which meant she was around more often than I was. I didn't mind. She kept to herself, rarely made noise, and paid her share on time. If anything, I was relieved I didn't have to deal with parties or messes. The first few weeks went smoothly. We exchanged small talk in the kitchen, traded Netflix recommendations, and occasionally made dinner together. But I started noticing strange things not long after I settled in. At first, it was little things. Evelyn would bring up topics I hadn't mentioned to her. Personal topics. She asked how I was sleeping when I hadn't complained. She commented on things like, "You looked upset in your dream last night, even though my bedroom door was always closed." I laughed it off, assuming she was just being observant or guessing based on my mood. But then, one morning, I walked into the kitchen and found her flipping through a leather-bound journal. She didn't try to hide it. She smiled and said, "I was just writing about last night." I assumed she meant something casual, maybe a general diary. But as she closed it, I caught a glimpse of the page. My name was at the top. That stopped me cold. I asked as casually as I could, "Are you keeping a journal about me?" She looked at me like I'd misunderstood. "Oh no. I just like to write down interesting dreams. Yours are fascinating." That struck me as strange, but I tried to laugh it off. "How would you know what I dream about?" Evelyn shrugged and said, "I just get a sense. You talk in your sleep sometimes." That was the first time I felt uncomfortable around her. I didn't remember ever talking in my sleep. No one had ever mentioned it before, but I let it go. What else could I do? Ask to read the journal? I told myself it was harmless. Maybe she was lonely. Maybe she was just imaginative. But it didn't stop there. I started keeping a notebook by my bed to write down my dreams. I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't being paranoid. And sure enough, some mornings Evelyn would bring up details, very specific ones, that I had written down but never spoken aloud. A conversation with my late grandmother. A recurring nightmare about a locked room. Even a strange dream where I was floating above my bed, watching myself sleep. Every time she mentioned it offhandedly, "You looked sad in that dream with a locked door?" Or, "It's weird how often you dream about being watched." I never told her any of those things. I tried testing her. One night I deliberately imagined a bizarre scenario before falling asleep. I was riding a unicycle through a burning supermarket while everyone clapped. Completely random, utterly ridiculous. The next morning I didn't say a word. That afternoon Evelyn asked if I liked circus acts. When I asked why, she said, "I just had this funny image in my head of you on a unicycle in a grocery store." Weird, right? I didn't answer. I went straight to my room and locked the door. I stopped sleeping properly after that. My anxiety was through the roof. I started waking up in the middle of the night, heart racing, convinced someone had been in my room. I changed my lock. I even set up a motion sensor alarm I ordered online. Nothing triggered it, but every morning there was more. She'd reference another dream, another private thought, another moment I hadn't shared. One night I couldn't take it anymore. I waited until Evelyn was out. She went on walks late at night sometimes, and I searched her room. I felt horrible doing it, but I needed answers. Her bedroom was meticulously neat. Her sketchbooks were stacked in color-coded piles. On the shelf was the leather journal, the same one I'd seen in the kitchen. I opened it. There were pages and pages, dozens of entries, each one dated, each one titled with my name. They weren't just summaries of dreams. They were narratives, written in first person as if she had experienced them. Private memories I'd never shared, dreams I hadn't written down. Some I barely remembered myself. There was one that chilled me more than the rest. It described a dream I'd had as a child, one I hadn't thought about in over a decade. In it I was trapped inside a box, unable to scream, while someone outside whispered my name over and over. The entry described every detail, even the smell of the wood, even the exact words. "Don't wake up yet." I sat there, reading with my hands shaking. The last entry was from the night before. "Tonight she saw me again. I smiled this time. She's starting to accept it. I heard the front door open. I put the journal back exactly where I found it and returned to my room, locking the door. I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, Evelyn acted normal. She asked if I wanted coffee. I told her I had a headache and left for work early, even though it was my day off. I spent the day trying to figure out what to do. Was she drugging me? Hypnotizing me? Reading my mind? None of it made sense, and that made it worse. I looked into moving out, but my lease wasn't up for another month and I didn't have the money to break it. That night, I woke up at 2:14 a.m. My lamp was on. I never left my lamp on, and my dream journal was open on my desk. I hadn't touched it. I rushed to the door. Locked. No signs of forced entry. I checked the motion sensor. Nothing. No alerts. The journal had a new entry. The handwriting wasn't mine. It read, "She's afraid now. Good. Fear makes the connection stronger." I packed a bag and left immediately. I went to a friend's, place across the city and stayed there for a week. I told my landlord there was a personal emergency and negotiated an early exit. I never returned to that flat. I never saw Evelyn again. I didn't try to. I didn't want to know how she did it. I just wanted to be done. But the dreams didn't stop. At first, I hoped they would fade, but they didn't. They got more vivid. She was always there, in the background at first, then closer, then speaking, then touching my arm, then whispering things I don't remember when I wake up. I moved 3 times, changed jobs, changed cities, but some mornings my journal is still open on the desk, and every now and then I find an entry I didn't write. Story number 12. I never thought a job could ruin my mind, let alone make me question reality itself. I was just trying to make rent. That's all it ever was to me, a paycheck, a place to clock in and out. But what happened that year in Dublin still follows me. It's not something I talk about often, mostly because when I do, people either laugh or look at me like I've lost it. But I know what happened. I lived through it. I started working at the call center in February 2021, during the tail end of lockdown. It was one of those customer support roles for a large tech company, mostly handling complaints, billing issues, and password resets. We weren't allowed to say which company it was, even in our personal lives, which already gave the place a weird air of secrecy. The building was modern, open floor plan, and about 100 desks packed close together. Each employee got a headset, a cubicle, and access to the customer database. Nothing fancy, nothing you'd look at twice. My shift was the evening one, 3 p.m. to midnight, because I preferred the quiet. Fewer supervisors, fewer eyes on me. Most of my calls were forgettable. Angry customers, confused elderly people, the occasional flirt. I handled them all the same. Detached, polite, efficient. Then I started noticing her. Her name was Emily. She sat a few rows away from me, but I could hear her sometimes when things got quiet. Her tone was odd. Not the cheerful, scripted voice we were trained to use, but something softer, slower, like she was hypnotizing people. At first I figured she was just one of those overachievers who took the job too seriously. But it was. What happened after her calls that got my attention? People started crying. Not just customers, co-workers. I saw grown men walk out of that building wiping their eyes, and no one talked about it. The first time I took a call that led me to her, I didn't realize it right away. The man on the other end, an American, I think, was shaken. He didn't even ask about his account. He just whispered, "She knows about my daughter." When I asked what he meant, he hung up. I flagged the call and mentioned it to my manager. She told me to ignore it. "People say strange things under stress," she said. That was the first crack. A few days later, I ran into Emily in the break room. She was standing by the vending machine, not buying anything, just staring at the glass. I greeted her casually. She didn't reply, just turned her head slowly and said, "Do you miss your brother?" My stomach dropped. I hadn't mentioned Liam to anyone at work. He died 5 years earlier in a car accident. There was no possible way she could have known. I froze, unsure whether to get angry or scared. She smiled faintly and walked away like nothing had happened. I convinced myself it was a fluke. Maybe I'd talked about him at some point and forgotten. Maybe she overheard something. Maybe it was coincidence. I tried to brush it off, but my sleep got worse. I'd dream about calls where I couldn't hear the other person, only heavy breathing and static. When I woke up, my phone would be open to random voicemails, always blank, always time-stamped at 3:17 a.m. I stopped checking them after the third one. Things at work got stranger. A colleague named Priya had a full-blown panic attack after finishing a call. She was rushed out of the office and never came back. Another guy, Declan, quit on the spot after Emily whispered something in his ear. I asked around, but no one would tell me what she said. They just shook their heads and muttered, "She's not right." Still, no one reported her. No one even confronted her. It was like everyone was scared to speak against her, like she had something on all of us. I became obsessed. I started logging her call times. I'd mark when she took breaks, when she arrived, when she left. I even tried listening in on her calls using the internal system, something we were absolutely not supposed to do, but the recordings were all scrambled, just static. One night I stayed late and checked her profile in the system. It didn't exist. There was no Emily in the employee list, no ID number, no login. Yet I watched her every day with my own eyes, sitting at her desk, headset on, calmly ruining people. I finally decided to confront her. It was a Thursday. The office was nearly empty. I walked over to her cubicle after pretending to forget my badge. She didn't turn around when I approached. She just sat there, staring at her screen, which was blank. "I know what you're doing," I said. My voice cracked halfway through. She slowly turned to face me. Her eyes were dull, like the color had drained out of them. She tilted her head, studying me the way you might study a spider crawling across your pillow. "I'm not doing anything," she said softly. "You're the one who keeps listening." I opened my mouth to reply, but I couldn't. It was like my throat locked up. She stood, leaned in closer than anyone ever should, and whispered something I'll never repeat. "Not because I want to protect you, but because I don't think I could even pronounce the sounds." It wasn't English. It wasn't any language I knew. It felt like she pushed the words into my skull instead of speaking them. I blacked out, woke up in the stairwell, with blood on my knuckles and no memory of how I got there. Security found me an hour later, confused and disoriented. They asked if I'd been drinking. I said yes. It was easier that way. The next day, her cubicle was empty. The chair was gone. The computer was gone. It looked like no one had ever sat there. I asked my manager what happened to Emily. She gave me a blank look and said, "Who?" I checked the logs again. Nothing. The paper trail was gone. It was like she had never existed. I thought I was going insane. I took a week off, flew home, tried to decompress. My parents said I looked different, thinner, paler. My mum made me sleep in my old room. I didn't argue. While I was there, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a folded page printed from the company's internal messaging system. It was a call transcript, one I never made. My name was listed as the agent, the customer, as private. The conversation was short. Agent: "Hello, thank you for calling. How can I help you today?" Customer: "I'm afraid." Agent: "I'm here to help." "What are you afraid of?" Customer: "You. Agent. Why me?" Customer: "Because you're becoming her." I burned the letter. I went back to work the next week pretending nothing had happened. I stopped asking questions. I smiled, took my calls, and kept my head down. But the calls changed. People started reacting to me differently. Some hung up the moment I spoke. Others cried without knowing why. One person asked, "Is this the same woman from before?" I hadn't changed anything. But something had changed in me. Then one night I caught my reflection in the black of the monitor. Just for a second, maybe less. I saw her face, not mine. Smiling faintly, not menacing, just patient. Like she was waiting. I left the job 2 days later. I moved cities, changed my number, started a new career. I work freelance now, online. No calls, no voices. I haven't used a headset since, but sometimes when I sleep I hear that voice again. Not hers, mine, repeating words I don't understand, over and over. I know how this sounds. I wouldn't believe it either, but I promise you, whatever she was, or is, she's still out there. And if you ever work in customer support, if the person next to you doesn't exist in the system, don't talk to them. And if they ever ask what you're afraid of, hang up. Don't answer. Story number 13. I used to live in Tokyo back in 1990, right after graduating from university. I'd landed a junior position at a mid-sized publishing firm in Shibuya and rented a tiny apartment near the outskirts of the city in a neighborhood called Edogawa. Every morning I took the same train, 7:06 a.m. from Kasai Station, to get to work. It was always crowded, always loud with announcements and shuffling feet, and always, without fail, I saw him. At first I didn't think anything of it. He was just another commuter. A man in his late 30s, always in a black suit, white shirt, dark gray tie, clean cut, unremarkable. He stood near the second set of doors in the third car, clutching a black briefcase in one hand, the overhead strap in the other. I noticed him because he never sat down, even when the train emptied out a bit toward the city, and he never checked a phone, never read a newspaper, never even looked out the window. He just stared forward, always quiet, always alone. After about 3 weeks of seeing him every morning, I started to think it was a little odd. Everyone had a routine, but his was too precise. He boarded the train at the same door, stood in the same spot, and never once seemed to get off, no matter which stop I exited. I tested it once. One morning, I stayed on the train past my usual stop at Shibuya, pretending to fall asleep. I watched him through the glass reflection. 5 more stations passed. He didn't move. Not even a flicker of decision in his eyes. Eventually, the train reached the final stop. Everyone got off, everyone except him. The doors stayed open for several minutes. The cleaning staff began to board, and I hesitated, lingering near the door as if trying to find something in my bag. That's when one of the station attendants approached the car. He looked at the man, said something in Japanese. The man didn't respond, didn't even blink. The attendant leaned in a little closer and repeated himself, louder. Still nothing. Eventually, he tapped the man on the shoulder. The reaction was strange. It was like watching a computer reboot. The man blinked, slowly turned his head, looked directly at the attendant, nodded once, and then walked off the train without a word. As soon as he was off, he walked right down the platform, back in the direction the train had come from. I watched until he disappeared through the crowd. That should have been the end of it. A weird guy with a weird routine. Tokyo is full of them. But the next morning at 7:06 a.m., when I boarded the train, there he was again. Same suit, same spot, same empty stare. It started to unsettle me. There was something unnatural about the way he held himself. Not stiff exactly, but controlled, like every movement was rehearsed. I started choosing a different car. I'd glance through the windows sometimes to see if he was still there. He always was. One evening, after staying late at work, I caught the 9:12 p.m. train home. The cars were nearly empty. I slid into a seat near the back, relieved to finally relax after a long day. As the train started moving, I glanced up. He was sitting across from me. That was the first time I'd ever seen him sitting, and the first time I'd seen him in the evening. He wasn't looking at me, just staring slightly above my head, like he was focused on something behind me. I tried not to stare, but it was impossible not to. Up close, his skin was pale, but not sickly, just too smooth. His eyes were dull, not tired, not bored, just lacking something, like someone had copied the idea of a person and hadn't filled in the rest. I shifted in my seat, pretending to be more interested in the window. My stop was still 6 stations away. The silence stretched. When the train stopped and no one boarded, I turned my head again. He was still staring above my head. I stood up, walked down the aisle, switched cars. My hands were shaking, though I couldn't explain why. When the train reached my station, I got off as casually as I could and moved toward the stairs without looking back. I told myself not to run. Running would make it real. The next morning, he wasn't on the train. And the day after that, he wasn't there either. For a few days, I allowed myself to believe that maybe he'd moved on, maybe changed lines, or maybe it really had all been in my head. But on the 5th morning, I boarded the train and saw him again. This time, he looked at me. It was only for a second, but it was deliberate. A flicker of recognition, just enough to confirm that he knew I had noticed him. And from that moment, I couldn't look away anymore. I started researching, not officially, just asking around. I asked coworkers if they'd ever seen a man like that. Same car, same time. Some shrugged. A few said he sounded familiar. One woman said, "That guy who never gets off? Yeah, he's always there. Creeps me out." I asked how long she'd seen him writing. She said since last year. I asked if she ever saw him get off. "No," she said, "but I think someone told me he works near Tokyo Station. Maybe he transfers." I checked with the station attendants. I made up a story about a friend who I thought was riding the train at the same time and went missing. They were polite but unhelpful. "Many people take that line," they said. "You should report a missing person if you're concerned." So I did. I went to a local Koban and described him. The officer took down my notes. He asked if I had a photo. I didn't. I'd never dared to take one. I offered to come back the next morning and point him out. The next morning, I boarded the train with a camera in my bag. He wasn't there. That day, the train stalled between stations for 7 minutes. No announcement. The lights flickered once. That never happened. When we finally reached Shibuya, I noticed a commotion near the front of the platform. Paramedics were wheeling someone out on a stretcher, covered by a white sheet. I asked another commuter what happened. She didn't know. Just that someone had collapsed, or maybe jumped. That night, I got a call from the police station. The officer I spoke with said they had checked station records. Surveillance footage only stores for 7 days unless flagged. They hadn't found anyone matching my description in the logs. "Maybe he switches cars before the cameras catch him," I suggested. The officer paused. "Or maybe he's not there when the cameras are on." I didn't sleep that night. Over the next few weeks I avoided the train. I borrowed money and took taxis when I could. When I had to ride the subway, I used different lines. I didn't see him again. Then, 2 months later, I got a letter. No name on the envelope. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. A grainy image of the inside of a train car. The third car of the Kasai to Shibuya line. Near the second set of doors, and standing there, eyes locked onto the camera lens, was the man. Only this time, he was smiling. I moved out of Tokyo within the month, found a job in Kyoto, took a local tram to work instead. Slower, more inconvenient, but safer, or so I thought. A few years later, while traveling through Osaka on business, I found myself on a subway platform during rush hour, crowded, noisy. I glanced across to the opposite platform. He was standing there, same suit, same briefcase, same empty eyes. He didn't board the train when it arrived, just watched it leave. He saw me. I know he did, but he didn't follow. I've moved 3 more times since then, changed cities, changed jobs, never took the same commute for more than a few months. I've tried to rationalize it. Maybe he's just a disturbed man who latches onto people who notice him. Maybe I was just unlucky. But in all my years of travel, I've never once seen anyone else like him, except for once, about 6 years ago. A news report from Seoul showed footage of a man boarding a train that later crashed due to unexplained electrical failure. No survivors. The image they used was blurry, grainy, but I recognized him. He never gets off the train. He just waits until someone notices, and then he follows. Story number 14. I found the flat on a student housing app. Clean, affordable, just a 15-minute walk to campus and in a decent part of London. The ad was posted by a guy named Marcus. He described himself as quiet, tidy, and into minimalism, which sounded perfect to me. I'd been living in noisy shared dorms for 2 years and was desperate for some peace. We exchanged a few polite messages, had a brief video call, and by the end of the week I'd signed the sublease and packed up my things. Marcus opened the door when I arrived. He looked normal, glasses, mid-20s, slightly awkward in that introverted way. He helped me carry in my bags and showed me around. The flat was smaller than the photos made it look, but it was clean. His room was down the hall, mine was opposite the bathroom, and the kitchen sat at the far end. He had this odd habit of narrating everything. "This is where we keep the plates. I usually clean the counters every Sunday." But I figured he was just a bit socially anxious. The first few days were uneventful. We coexisted politely, exchanged hellos, even watched a Netflix series together one evening. But I started noticing little things. My mug was in the sink even though I hadn't used it. A pair of my socks went missing from the laundry. My shampoo level seemed lower. Then I remembered. Nothing serious, just small, annoying inconsistencies. I thought maybe I was misremembering or being paranoid. About a week in, Marcus asked if I wanted to go halves on groceries. I said sure and handed him some cash. He came back with a bunch of things I never ate: soy milk, unlabeled cans, some off-brand frozen meals. I told him I'd just start buying my own. He seemed totally fine with it. Too fine, actually. The next day, one of the cans was open in the fridge with my name scratched into the lid. Not written, but scratched. I never opened it. I threw it away and didn't say anything. The turning point came the night I decided to clean the freezer. We'd had a minor issue with something leaking inside, and since it was mostly his food in there, I wanted to tidy up before my own groceries arrived the next morning. I pulled out drawer after drawer, tossing out some expired items, rearranging to make space. Then I saw it, a blue plastic container that didn't belong to me. It was the kind with a snap-on lid, no label. I opened it, and there it was. Mine? Oh, toothbrush. I stared at it for a solid 5 seconds before my brain caught up with what I was seeing. My old toothbrush, the one I had thrown out a few days ago after noticing the bristles looked wrong, frayed in ways I didn't remember. I thought, maybe I'd just been brushing too hard, so I replaced it and moved on. But now here it was, in the freezer, inside a food container, and resting on what looked like a folded paper towel. I didn't know what to do. I closed the lid, put it back exactly how I found it, and sat down at the kitchen table trying to think. My first reaction was disbelief. It felt too weird, too specific. Was it a prank? A misunderstanding? But there was no one else in the flat. Just me and Marcus. I didn't confront him right away. I needed to be sure. I started watching him more closely. He had this habit of locking his door, even when just going to the bathroom. I tested it once, knocked, and asked if I could borrow a charger. His door opened half an inch, his face peeking through like he was guarding something behind him. He handed me the charger without a word. Another time, I woke up to find my door slightly open. I always locked it before bed, always. But that morning, it was ajar. Nothing was missing. But it felt wrong. The kind of wrong you feel in your stomach, even when your brain can't explain it. I bought a small USB camera and placed it in my bookshelf, angled toward the door. I didn't tell anyone. That night I locked my door again, double-checked it, and went to sleep. At 2:43 a.m., the footage showed my door quietly opening. Marcus, standing still for a moment, barefoot, his eyes reflecting the hallway light. He walked in slowly, didn't touch anything, didn't even look around. He just stood there at the foot of my bed for over 7 minutes. Then he turned around and walked out, pulling the door softly shut behind him. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning I packed a bag, left the flat, and stayed at a friend's place across town. I didn't even tell her the whole story, just said my flatmate was creeping me out. She didn't press for more. I spent the entire day thinking about what to do. I could go to the police, but what would I say? He put my toothbrush in the freezer and watched me sleep. There was no crime, just a trail of deeply disturbing behavior. I decided I needed to go back, not to live, but to retrieve the rest of my things and set up a confrontation. I didn't want to leave it open-ended. I didn't want him thinking I ran away, afraid. I messaged him saying I'd be back to grab the last of my stuff and that I had a new place lined up. He replied within a minute. "No worries. Let me know if you need help moving anything." When I arrived, he was sitting in the living room acting like nothing had happened. I kept the interaction short, avoided eye contact. I packed up quickly. I left the toothbrush container right where I found it, but just before I left, I turned to him and said, "By the way, Marcus, I saw the footage." His face didn't change. He blinked once, tilted his head slightly, and said, "You should lock your door." Then he smiled. That was it. I left and never looked back. I didn't report him. I didn't tell the landlord. I just erased that chapter from my life and moved on, taking every precaution in the world when choosing roommates ever since. But sometimes I think about that moment. The calm, the smile, the complete lack of fear in his eyes. Not fear of being caught, not fear of being wrong, just calm, as if he'd done this before, as if he didn't consider it wrong at all, and that's what still creeps me out the most. Story number 15. She wasn't supposed to be there. I remember thinking that when I first saw her, standing a few feet from my aunt's casket, holding a bouquet of white lilies and shaking hands. I'd never seen her before in my life. No one in my family had. She was too calm, too poised, not like the rest of us who were breaking apart piece by piece as the service dragged on. She didn't cry, didn't speak, didn't sit. She just stood there, watching, like she was evaluating the whole event. I didn't pay much attention then. Grief messes with your head. You assume people are there for the same reasons you are, to say goodbye, to mourn, to remember. But something about her didn't sit right. It was the way she stood perfectly still, like a statue carved into the crowd, and then she left, quietly. No one noticed except me. She didn't even wait for the burial. I forgot about her for a few days. The kind of forgetting that's not really forgetting, more like storing it away in a mental drawer marked weird but not urgent, until the flowers started arriving. It was 3 days after the funeral. A bouquet showed up on my doorstep. Same lilies, same neat black ribbon. No note. I thought maybe it was from a friend or someone from work who had heard about my aunt's passing. I thanked a few people, but no one claimed them. A few days later, another bouquet. Same thing. Lilies, ribbon, no note. That's when I started to feel the chill of it. Not fear, not yet. Just something being off. I called my cousin Mara, asked her if she'd been getting flowers too. She hadn't. Neither had anyone else in the family. I even called the funeral home to ask if they gave out attendee lists. They didn't. The only people who signed the guest book were ones we all knew. That woman never signed in. The third delivery didn't go to my house. It went to my parents. My mother called, confused. "Did you send these?" she asked. I didn't. The next day they came to my workplace. My receptionist handed them to me with a smile. "You've got a secret admirer," she joked, but there was nothing romantic about these flowers. They felt clinical, intentional, like evidence. It took a while for me to track the florist. I called around, gave vague descriptions, until one woman on the phone recognized the order details. "Always lilies?" she asked. I nodded before realizing she couldn't see me. "Same woman," she said. "Always pays in cash. Never leaves a name." When I asked what she looked like, her description was exact. Mid-30s, black coat, long dark hair, polite voice. She even remembered the woman mentioning a different funeral once. But the date didn't match my aunt's. It was from a month before. That night I didn't sleep. I sat up trying to make sense of it. Why would someone go to a funeral for a person she didn't know, and then start sending flowers afterward? And not just once, repeatedly, always the same, always anonymous. My aunt had been a schoolteacher. She didn't have enemies. She wasn't famous. There was nothing about her death that should have drawn attention. 2 weeks later, another funeral. This time, it was Mara's co-worker, a young guy who died in a motorcycle crash. I didn't know him well, but Mara invited me along to keep her company. As we stood near the back of the service, my eyes scanned the crowd without meaning to. And there she was, the same woman, standing at the edge of the room like she belonged there. No one acknowledged her. She didn't speak. She held lilies. I nudged Mara. "That's her," I whispered. "From my aunt's funeral." Mara looked confused. "Who?" I motioned slightly with my chin. "That woman, in the corner." But when Mara turned to look, she was gone. I pushed through a few people, hurried to the exit, but there was no trace of her. It was like she'd melted into the walls. That's when I started documenting things. Taking photos of the bouquets. Logging dates and addresses. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I had to start treating it seriously. I even set up a motion camera at my front door. The next time the flowers came, I checked the footage. She never approached the door. A delivery man dropped them off, but when I visited the florist again, they confirmed she still paid in cash. Never left a name. Somehow she was arranging deliveries to places she shouldn't know I'd be. I was scared now. The kind of fear that you don't say out loud because it makes you sound paranoid. But I wasn't imagining this. It was real. I filed a report with the police, but they didn't take it seriously. "Flowers aren't a crime," one officer said. I could tell he thought I was overreacting, so I did something I'm not proud of. I followed a funeral. I found one posted online, a local obituary, someone I didn't know. I went to the service, scanning the faces, and just like before, she was there, quiet, observing, holding those damn lilies. I waited until the end, then tailed her out of the chapel. She walked with calm, deliberate steps, got into a silver sedan. I followed from a distance. She didn't go far, just to a small apartment complex across town. She didn't rush, didn't look around. She knew no one was watching, except I was. I parked down the street, wrote down the plate number, waited a while, then left. I thought about confronting her, but I didn't know what I'd even say. "Why are you haunting my grief?" That night I couldn't stop shaking. I gave the plate to a friend who worked at a car rental agency. He pulled some strings and traced the name. Amanda Keyes. No known criminal record. No job listed. Her address matched the apartment I'd followed her to. I debated for a long time before I decided to visit. I knocked on her door around noon, on a Saturday. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. I was about to leave when the door creaked open. Not fully, just a sliver, enough to see her eyes. "You shouldn't be here," she said, calm as ever. "I need to know why," I said. There was a pause. Then she opened the door a bit wider. No chain, no barrier. Just her, still wearing black. "Come in." I shouldn't have. Every instinct told me to leave, but I stepped inside. Her apartment was pristine, silent. It smelled faintly of lilies. There were photos on the walls. None of her, none of anyone I recognized. Just funeral pamphlets, clipped newspaper, obituaries, laminated programs. Dozens of them. "You don't know these people," I said. "I don't have to," she replied. "I honor them." "Why mine?" I asked. "Why my aunt? Why me?" She looked at me, her eyes impossibly sad. "I lost someone once, years ago. No one came to the funeral, not even her own family. Since then, I go to the ones that feel forgotten." "But my aunt wasn't forgotten," I said. "She had us. She had family." She nodded. "Sometimes I get it wrong." That's when I noticed the binder on her coffee table. I opened it. Inside were names, addresses, photos. Mine, my parents', Maraz. Notes about where we lived, who was connected to whom, like a case file. "You stalked us," I said, holding up the binder. She didn't deny it. "I like to know who cares, who shows up, who deserves to be remembered. You sent flowers to our homes." "It's part of the ritual," she said. "I leave something behind, a reminder." My throat went dry. "You're not helping people. You're inserting yourself into their pain." Her smile faltered. "Grief should be shared." I left without another word. I took the binder, reported her to the police again. This time they listened, but barely. There was no clear crime, they said, no proof of malicious intent. But a restraining order was issued. She wasn't allowed near me or my family again. The flowers stopped. Months passed. I tried to forget her. I went to therapy, moved apartments, changed numbers, blocked the memory. Then, a year later, I attended a funeral for a friend's father. Small gathering. Quiet. Familiar. As I walked back to my car, I saw a single white lily on the windshield. No card. That was the last time. I never saw her again. But I still find myself scanning the crowd at every funeral I attend, just in case, and I never send flowers. Story number 16. It started with something small. I had just moved into a new apartment in Dublin after a rough breakup, needing space and silence. The building was older but not falling apart. 3 floors, narrow halls, the kind of place where people nod at you on the stairs but never learn your name. I liked that. I wasn't looking for anyone to know me. I was trying to be alone, heal, figure things out. So when I came home one Friday and saw a small brown box on my doormat, my first thought was that it had been delivered to the wrong person. It had no postage, no label, just my first name on a sticky note, to Emma. Inside was a smooth black notebook and a new pen. Not expensive, but neat. Clean. I write in journals, or I did, and I'd mentioned it once in passing at work. Still, it felt odd. I assumed it was from my coworker Sophie, who always encouraged my writing. I texted her a thank you, and she sent back a, "What are you talking about?" The next one came on a Tuesday. Same kind of box, same sticky note, same careful handwriting. This time it was a mug, white, plain, but with "You've got this" in cheerful print. I laughed, mostly because I'd broken my last favorite mug just the night before. It was such a specific replacement. I asked around again. Nobody admitted to it. After the third gift, a pair of soft wool socks, I started to feel uneasy. It wasn't just the gifts. It was how they were always timed perfectly. After I'd mentioned, even quietly to myself, that I needed something. And I mean that literally. I remember thinking I should get warmer socks while I was brushing my teeth one night. I hadn't told anyone. I stopped joking about it with coworkers. I stopped asking if it was them. It wasn't funny anymore. One night, I stayed up late watching a show on my laptop. Around 2 a.m., I heard a soft knock at the door. Not urgent, not loud, just 2 little taps. My stomach dropped. I waited. Nothing followed. I didn't answer, of course. I lived alone. I stayed completely still, even held my breath. The hallway was quiet, too quiet. In the morning I found another gift. This time it was resting against the door, not even in a box, a small framed photo of the Halfpenny Bridge. It was a nice picture, but the frame was dusty, like it had been in someone's drawer for a long time. The back had a name scratched out in pen. I didn't bring that one inside. I threw it in the bin outside. That week I had a locksmith come and check my door. He confirmed it was fine. I added a camera doorbell. Not the fancy kind, just something basic that recorded short clips if someone came close. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself it was harmless. Probably someone with a crush, maybe someone shy or just lonely. The camera showed nothing for 2 days. Then it caught someone. It was a short clip, just 6 seconds. A person wearing a dark hoodie, hood up, walking slowly past my door. The camera didn't catch a face. No delivery, no knocking, just walking by. But as they passed, their head turned, ever so slightly, toward the door. I showed it to my landlord. He shrugged. "People walk through here all the time," he said. "Can't even see who it is." So I went to the gardie. They were polite but said there was no threat, no crime, no evidence anyone was doing anything dangerous. "Could be a neighbor being sweet," one officer said. I started taking a different route home. I changed my schedule, varied the times I left the house. I stopped going to my favorite cafe. Still, the gifts came. Always once a week, always unmarked. A candle, a book, a charm bracelet with a tiny letter E. And each time the handwriting was the same. Neat. Rounded letters. No smudges, no ink mistakes. I stopped opening them. I put them in a shoebox and shoved it in the back of my closet. Then came the letter. Unlike the gifts, this one was in an envelope. It was inside my apartment when I got home, resting on my kitchen counter. I froze. I backed out, called the gardie again, and they actually came this time. They searched the place. Nothing was stolen. No signs of a break-in. My windows were locked. The door was untouched. No fingerprints other than mine. The letter was short. You looked sad last week. I hope this helps. I miss when you smiled more. No name, no signature. Just that. My hands shook when I read it. I changed the locks again. The Gardaí recommended installing a second lock from the inside. I started sleeping with my bedroom door locked too. I stopped going out. I had food delivered, left it outside the door. The neighbors started noticing I wasn't around. Someone knocked to check on me once. I didn't answer. Weeks passed. No more gifts, no more letters. The camera caught nothing. I started thinking maybe whoever it was had lost interest, or maybe I'd scared them off. I began breathing easier. Until one Sunday morning I opened the wardrobe to get a sweater and found something neatly folded on the top shelf. It was a t-shirt. One of mine, but not one I remembered losing. It smelled freshly washed. My stomach turned. It had been worn recently, not by me. Underneath it was a new notebook, just like the first one. Inside was a single sentence written in the same round handwriting. You don't have to be scared if you understand me. I left the apartment that day with nothing but my phone and wallet. I called a friend and stayed with her for 2 weeks. I didn't go back. I let the landlord clear out my things. I quit my job. I moved to Cork under a new lease, new number, new everything. I didn't tell anyone except 2 close friends. 6 months passed. No gifts, no letters. Then one morning I got a package at my new address. This time it was posted properly. A cardboard box with a return address I didn't recognize. It was from Belfast. My heart sank. I nearly threw it away, but I didn't. I opened it, slowly, carefully. Inside was another framed photo. This time it was me, sitting at the park near my new flat, eating a sandwich, headphones in, completely unaware. The photo had been taken from a distance, but close enough to see my face clearly. There was no note, nothing else in the box. Went to the Gardaí in Cork. They opened a case, took the photo, promised to investigate, but nothing came of it. No prints. The return address led to a vacant lot. That was 3 years ago. I don't know who they were. I don't know what they wanted. But I think about them often. The way they watched. The way they listened. The precision. It wasn't love. It wasn't obsession. It was something colder. A need to be inside my life without being invited. Sometimes when I get home, I check the hall behind me. I check the doormat. I keep my windows locked. Always. I haven't received another gift since then. But I still can't throw out that last photo. I need the reminder that someone once watched everything I did, knew what I wanted before I said it, and tried to own me through kindness, and that one day they might come back. Story number 17. It started in April of 2001. I remember because it was just after I'd moved into my new flat in Dublin's north side. Small, modest, but mine. It was my first time living alone, and I'd only been at my new job for a few months. Everything felt fresh and unstable, like one gust could knock my little life off balance. The first gift arrived a week after I moved in. I came home from work, tired and irritated by the traffic on Dorset Street, and there it was. A small, neat brown box sitting on my doorstep. No note, no name, just wrapped with plain string. Inside was a set of beautifully bound notebooks, the kind I could never justify buying for myself. I assumed it was from my sister. She knew I loved journaling, and she was always doing thoughtful things like that. I rang her that evening to thank her. "Not me," she said, laughing. "But now I feel bad I didn't think of it. You sure it didn't come with a card or anything?" I double-checked. Nothing. That was the first time I felt it. A flicker of unease. A nice gift with no sender. I told myself it was probably from someone at work. Maybe a team welcome. I brought it up the next day, casually, during lunch. Blank stares all around. The second gift came the following Friday. A framed photo, black and white, vintage-looking, of the Ha'penny Bridge at night. Beautiful. But again, no note. I didn't even tell anyone this time. It felt weirder to ask than to accept it in silence. Over the next few weeks, more gifts came. Not daily, not even weekly. Just often enough to keep me off balance. A set of teacups, a small bonsai tree, a rare book I'd once mentioned in passing during a conversation at work. That one rattled me. I'd said it out loud only once, over coffee with one of the girls in accounting. She barely remembered the title, let alone the author. Each time, the wrapping was the same. Plain brown paper, neat string. No receipts, no branding, no return addresses. And always, no card. I started keeping a list. A secret one in one of the notebooks from the first box. I don't know why. Maybe I hoped that writing it down would make it feel more rational, less like a game I didn't agree to play. I told my sister again, more seriously this time. She laughed, but there was a little hesitation in her voice. That's kind of sweet, isn't it? Maybe someone's got a crush. A crush. That would have been the flattering explanation. But there was something off about it. Crushes usually come with some kind of interaction, right? A smile, a compliment, a nervous conversation, not silence wrapped in string. Around June, it escalated. Came home late from work. We'd had a last-minute deadline. When I reached the door, I stopped. The box was already on the mat, like usual. But this one was different. Larger, heavier. I hesitated before picking it up. My name was written on it for the first time. Not in cursive, block letters, no address, just for you. I brought it inside, sat it on the kitchen table, and opened it slowly. Inside was a coat, a gorgeous tailored trench, the exact one I'd tried on at a shop in town 2 weeks earlier. I'd admired it, checked the price tag, and moved on. I hadn't told a soul about it. I froze. The shop hadn't taken my name. I didn't buy anything. I didn't even try it on for long. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak in the building made me twitch. I left the coat in the hallway, untouched. The next morning I went to the Garda station. I didn't know what I was even reporting. Gifts? A mystery admirer? I felt stupid. But I brought the coat, showed the list I'd been keeping, told them everything. The officer on duty listened politely, jotted down some notes, and said they'd look into it. But with no threats, no crime, there wasn't much they could do. That same week I installed a security camera above my door. Cheap one from a tech shop. I didn't tell anyone. I figured if I caught someone dropping off a package, I'd finally have answers. It worked. Sort of. 10 days later, another box. I raced inside, rewound the footage. My hands were shaking. The video showed a figure, hood up, head down, moving fast. They approached my door around 3:14 a.m., placed the package, quietly, then walked back toward the street. No car, no pause, just in and out. The footage wasn't clear enough for a face, but one detail stuck with me. The person wore gloves. Thick ones. Inside the box was a scarf, hand-knit, in my favorite color. I started looking over my shoulder more, on the bus, at work, walking home. I stopped going to the gym in the evenings. My friends noticed. "You okay?" they asked. "You seem tense." I lied. "Just work stress." Then came the letter, It arrived on a Tuesday in September, not in a box, just slipped under my door. A single sheet of paper, typed. No signature. Do you like what I've given you? I only wanted to make your life more comfortable. It makes me happy to see you happy. I watch you smile when you open the boxes. I know what you need, even before you do. That's how close we are now. I couldn't breathe. I remember the letter fluttering to the floor because my hands were shaking so badly. That night I packed a bag and went to my sister's. I didn't explain. I just showed her the letter. She didn't laugh this time. We went back to the Garda the next day. This time they took it more seriously. The officer said it bordered on harassment now. They took my camera footage. The letter, even the scarf and coat. They said they'd look into it, told me to stay somewhere else if I could. I stayed with my sister for 3 weeks. Nothing came to her place, no boxes, no letters. I started to feel safe again. Then she got one. It was a small package left outside her apartment. Same wrapping, same string. Inside was a photo of me. From behind, walking down a street near her home. There was a note this time, handwritten in thick black ink. You're running out of places. I moved back home with my parents after that. I quit my job, changed my number, deleted my social media. We never caught him or her. The Garda followed up twice, said they didn't have enough to go on. The camera footage was too grainy. No fingerprints. The handwriting didn't match anyone in their system. No one ever tried to use the information in a malicious way. Technically, it wasn't even stalking. But I knew. I knew that someone had built a version of me in their head and fed it with gifts, with attention, with silence. They thought they were giving me happiness. What they gave me was fear I still carry. It's been over 20 years now. I've changed cities twice, jobs 3 times, married, had a daughter. But every so often, even now, I get nervous when a box is left at the door, when a letter has no return address, when someone says, "This gift is from someone who wants to stay anonymous." I never accept. I never open them, because some gifts don't come from love. Some come from obsession pretending to be love. And once you've opened the first one, you never know what the last one will be. Story number 18. It started with the toothbrush. I know how that sounds, but I swear it's true. I came home from work late one evening, exhausted, threw my bag on the couch, and went to brush my teeth before crashing. When I opened the bathroom cabinet, I noticed there were 2 toothbrushes in the holder. Mine, blue with a small crack near the base, and another one, identical. Same color, same brand, same crack. At first I thought maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I'd bought a new one and forgot the old one was still there. I pulled them both out, held them side by side, and couldn't tell them apart. That's when something cold crawled up the back of my neck. I lived alone, always had. My apartment in Melbourne was tiny. Just 1 bedroom, 1 bath, and I had the only set of keys. I told myself I was being paranoid, probably overworked, and threw one of the toothbrushes away. I made a mental note to change the locks just in case, but the next morning I forgot all about it. Work was demanding, and by the time I got home again, I was more focused on kicking off my heels and nuking some leftovers than checking locks. Then, 3 days later, I opened the fridge and saw a bottle of almond milk sitting on the top shelf. I'm allergic to almonds. I've never bought almond milk in my life. I stood there staring at it, frozen. It had my grocery store's sticker on it, same chain, same location. It wasn't something exotic or rare, but still, I hadn't bought it. I was sure of it. I started checking the apartment more carefully after that. I'd leave small things a certain way. My earrings placed in a dish facing opposite directions, a single hairpin tucked under the bathroom sink, the remote angled on the coffee table, and when I came home, some of those things would be different. Not wildly out of place, just enough to feel wrong. The earrings would be flipped, the pin gone, the remote perfectly centered. I didn't tell anyone. I thought, maybe I was losing it. Maybe I was sleepwalking. I even installed a cheap security camera pointed at the front door, but every night it showed the same thing. Me leaving, me coming back, no one else. Then came the day I forgot my phone at home. It was a Thursday. I realized it halfway to the office, cursed under my breath, and turned back. I lived only a few tram stops away, so I figured I could grab it and still make it in before the morning meeting. I took the elevator up, unlocked the door, stepped inside, and froze. The TV was on. I never left the TV on. It was playing a talk show I'd never watched before, the volume low, like someone had just stepped out for a second and forgot to turn it off. I stood in the doorway listening. My heart was pounding so loudly in my ears I could barely hear anything else. I checked every room, every corner, even under the bed. No one. I picked up my phone. It was sitting on the couch exactly where I remembered leaving it, and walked back toward the door. That's when I saw the framed photo on the hallway shelf had been moved, just slightly, tilted a little to the left. I hadn't touched it in months. That night I didn't sleep. I locked every window, double-checked the door, and sat awake, on the couch with the lights on. Around 2 a.m. I started scrolling through Reddit threads about stalkers, home invasions, double lives. I didn't find answers, but I found stories that made me feel less alone, and a lot more scared. The next day, I asked my landlord if anyone had reported strange activity in the building. He gave me a look like I'd asked if the walls were haunted, then told me the building was secure and that no one had reported break-ins. I asked if there were other units on my floor still vacant. He said no. That night, I stayed at a friend's place. I didn't tell her the whole story, just that my apartment felt off. She didn't press. I slept like a rock. But when I came back the next morning to grab some clothes, I found something on my bed that hadn't been there before. A scarf. My scarf. Except not. It was identical to one I owned, gray with little black diamond shapes, but this one still had the store tag on it, and I'd cut mine off years ago. I stood there, holding it in my hands, not sure what I was even looking at. A copy of something I already owned, like the toothbrush. I finally called the police. They sent a pair of officers who gave the apartment a cursory look, asked if anything had been stolen. Nothing had. If there were signs of forced entry, there weren't, and told me it was probably just a prank or someone who'd copied my key. They suggested changing the locks and getting better cameras. I did both that afternoon, and for a while nothing happened, until I got a letter in the mail. No return address, no stamp. Just my name on the envelope, written in handwriting that looked eerily like mine. Inside was a single sheet of paper, printed in plain black font. "You live so well, it's like you made it for me." That was it. I moved out that weekend, packed everything I could in boxes, left the rest. Found a sublet through a friend, no questions asked. I told myself it was over, that whoever it was, they'd targeted the apartment, not me. But 2 weeks later, it happened again. I came home to the sublet and saw a sticky note on the fridge. It read, "Try the almond milk this time." There was none in the fridge. Nothing else was missing or moved. I started shaking so badly I had to sit down on the floor. I called the cops again. Same routine. Nothing taken, no signs of entry. They didn't take me seriously, said I was probably being messed with by someone I knew. I stopped calling them after that. That night I sat on the couch with my laptop, determined to track down anything, anyone who might be behind this. I looked through my social media, friend lists, old messages. Nothing stood out. No exes, no enemies. No one with access to my old place or my new one. But then I remembered something. When I'd first moved into the apartment in Melbourne, I'd been given the wrong unit number on the lease by mistake. For a few days, I'd accidentally been entering 6B instead of 6D. The keys had worked. I'd assumed it was some fluke or duplicate lock. When I realized the mistake, I told the landlord and switched to the right unit. It had seemed harmless at the time. What if... I went back to the old building the next morning, walked up to 6B, and knocked. No answer. I waited, then knocked again. Still nothing. I pressed my ear to the door. Silence. I slid a piece of junk mail under the door, then knocked once more, and left. An hour later I came back. The paper was gone. Someone was inside. I stayed across the street for hours. Eventually, around dusk, I saw her. She looked like me. Not exactly. Different hair color, slightly taller, different walk. But she wore the same style of coat I owned. Same bag. Same way of holding her phone in one hand, keys in the other. She walked out of 6B and turned the corner like she belonged there. My chest felt hollow. My hands were ice. I waited until she disappeared, then went to the landlord's office. I asked if he could tell me who lived in 6B. He refused, of course, privacy, and all that, but I could tell from his expression that he was hiding something. I pressed harder. Told him I thought the person might be using my name. That got his attention. He pulled up the records. The name on the lease for 6B, mine. He showed me the file, my name, my old ID, my old job title from 3 years ago. But the signature wasn't mine. Someone had used my old information to rent the wrong unit and never corrected it. She'd been living in 6B since I moved out of 6D. Almost a full year now. Living like me. I reported it. Took the whole file to the police. This time, they took it seriously. They went to 6B with a warrant. What they found still makes my skin crawl. The apartment was a mirror of mine. Same furniture. Same layout. Same decorations. Even the same photos. Though in hers, the faces were sometimes edited. Slightly warped. A bit too perfect. She had doubles of things I owned. Clothes, jewelry, even my high school yearbook. She wasn't there. She'd vanished. But on the kitchen table there was a note. Thanks for warming it up for me. I'll find you again. I haven't seen her since. I changed cities, changed jobs, got a new phone number, deleted my socials. I still sleep with the lights on. I still check the fridge. And every time I see someone walking behind me, just close enough to hear my footsteps, I wonder, is she still living as me? Or is she just waiting for me to stop living so she can take my place again? Don't think I'll ever know. Story 19.
I was a young nurse back in 1988, fresh out of St. Joseph's training program, and newly placed in the pediatric oncology unit of a private hospital in New Jersey. We had one floor all to ourselves, small but tightly run. My shifts were long and exhausting, but the kids made it worthwhile. They were stronger than most adults I knew, especially considering the odds stacked against them. That's where I met Emma. She was 14 when she was admitted. Diagnosed with osteosarcoma, bone cancer. It had already spread to her lungs. You wouldn't guess that from the way she smiled, though. Emma had this calm, disarming energy. She didn't cry when they inserted the port. She didn't scream when her hair started falling out. She just handled it, mature beyond her years. I became one of her primary nurses. I changed her linens, walked her to her scans, sat with her when the nausea got bad. We bonded, like many of us do with long-term patients. She told me about her dog, Murphy, and how she used to climb trees before her leg started hurting. Her mum brought her books almost daily, and she read them so quickly we had to use the hospital library to keep up. One day, about 3 months into her treatment cycle, she asked me something strange. "Is Dr. Marcus in today?" I paused, checking my schedule clipboard. "Dr. Simmons is on rotation today." "Why?" She frowned a little, but it wasn't an angry look, more like confused. "I haven't seen Dr. Marcus in a while." I assumed it was just chemo fog. Some patients got mentally disoriented. Dates and names could blur. "We don't have a Dr. Marcus here, sweetheart. Maybe you're mixing him up with one of the radiologists." "No. He's the one who told me I could beat it," she said, eyes focused. "He wears a grey tie and has a little scar on his chin. It caught me off guard, the detail, but I smiled. "Maybe you met him before coming here." She shook her head. "He works here. I saw him in this hallway. I didn't press it that day." Kids sometimes imagine figures of comfort, especially when facing something so life-threatening. But Emma brought him up again, twice, then 3 times. Each time she described him, the details stayed the same. Grey tie, scar on the chin, smells like cologne, not strong, kind of like lemon. It became so consistent that I mentioned it casually to one of the senior nurses during break. Carol, who'd worked there 10 years longer than I had, listened with her cigarette, halfway to her lips. "We never had a Dr. Marcus," she said flatly. "Not in this hospital. But Emma swears he works here." Carol gave a shrug and lit her smoke. "Maybe it's a doctor from another floor. Maybe he came with a visiting group." But something didn't sit right with me, so I went digging. First, I checked the on-call rotation logs for the past 3 months. No Marcus. Then I checked with HR. I had to pretend I was helping a patient recall their file and needed to match the face to a name. I described the man Emma had mentioned. Scar, tie, lemon cologne. The woman at the desk raised her eyebrows. "That's pretty specific," she said. "But we've never had a Dr. Marcus on staff." "What about a resident or intern?" She tapped a few keys, then shook her head. "Nope. Closest name match is a Marciano, and he left 3 years ago." I returned to Emma's room that night, now more curious than concerned. "Can you tell me more about Dr. Marcus?" She looked up from her sketchpad. "He talks to me when it's quiet, at night, or sometimes after scans. He told me to stay brave because I have things left to do." I forced a calm smile. "And you're sure he works here?" She nodded slowly, but then added, "But no one else ever sees him." I pressed again. "Do you remember the last time you saw him?" She thought for a second. "The day after my lung biopsy. I woke up and he was sitting in that chair." She pointed at the armchair by her window. "He held my hand for a little bit. Said, 'This isn't the end. There's more waiting.' Then he left." I checked the visitor logs. No sign of any Marcus. By this point, my gut told me this wasn't just imagination, but I didn't know what to think. So I did what any rational person does when logic fails. I reached out beyond protocol. My cousin Joel worked in the Public Licensing Board for State Health Services. I called him on a weekend and asked a favor. "Can you run the name Dr. Marcus for me, just in New Jersey?" "What's the full name?" "I don't know," I said. "Just Dr. Marcus, pediatric oncologist, maybe internal medicine." He called me back 4 days later. There's no currently licensed doctor by that name in NJ, but there was one. Dr. Daniel Marcus. He had a practice in northern Jersey, lost his license in '84. Why? Joel hesitated. He didn't do anything wrong. He passed away. Car accident, drunk driver. My stomach flipped. I asked if he had a photo on record. He emailed me an archived article. It was him, scar on his chin, grey suit, a funeral photo. I didn't tell Emma what I found. How could I? Instead, I sat with her more. She kept mentioning Dr. Marcus on and off, less frequently as her treatment escalated. Her lungs weren't responding the way doctors hoped. Her chemo rounds got more aggressive. Her eyes lost some light. But one day, while I was refilling her, "Water," she whispered. "He told me it's almost time." I looked over. "Who?" "Dr. Marcus. He said not to be scared." I froze. "Emma." She looked at me calmly. "He said he was waiting for someone too once, that he didn't get to finish everything either." Tears stung my eyes, but I smiled and kissed her forehead. She passed away that night. Her mom was holding her left hand. I was holding her right. There were no machines, no code blue, no panic, just a stillness and a strange smell in the air, like citrus almost. I don't care if no one else believes it. I know what I know. About a week later, I received an envelope in the nurse's station mailbox. It was unmarked. Inside was a single page. It was a child's drawing, Emma's style. Two people stood beneath a tree, a tall man in a grey suit, and a girl with short hair and a book in her hand. They were holding hands. At the bottom, in crooked little letters, it read, "I found him." That was almost 4 decades ago. I stayed in the field, eventually moved into hospice work, but I never again met a patient who described someone like Emma did, or a presence like Dr. Marcus. I sometimes wonder if people who pass too early linger behind in pieces, or if maybe sometimes those who were taken too soon find a way to guide someone else through their ending, the way they never got. All I know for sure is this: whether he was a memory, a spirit, or something else entirely, she believed. He was real, and maybe, just maybe, that made all the difference. She wasn't scared when she left, and I think that was his goal all along.
Which story setting scared you the most? Let me know in the comments. Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you stuck around until the end, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. As always, I'm looking for more story ideas, so drop a comment below with any themes or experiences you'd like to hear next. Stay safe out there, and until next time, keep your eyes open.